Amagua, Panua Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the Sabbath. Barakatha Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathanawa, Hashabeth, Bashalawam, Tawada, Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the Sabbath and peace. Thank you, so be it. The Alim Ma'ash Shariah Machat, Psalms 121. Harim Mayan Yabawa Isaiah Yabawa Mayahawa Shashad Shemayim Warataza La Ganathan Lamawat Ragalia Yala Yanawam Shashramarka Hana La Yanawam Wala Yeshan Shashramar Yashrali Yahweh Shemarim Yahweh Tazali Ayu Yim Yawamam Hashemesh La Kaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashemarim Makam Right, Yashima, na Pasha, Yahweh, Yashima, Habalakya, Wabawa Aya, my Tha, wa Aid, I will Basham, Yahweh, the water, man.
Psalm 121. I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. You will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil, shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth even forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Shemaiah Sharala, hero Israel. Shemaiah Yashrali Yahweh Elohim Yahweh Akhay Shemaiah Yashrali Yahweh Elohim Yahweh Akhay Shemaiah Yashrali Yahweh Elohim Yahweh Akhay.
Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our Father is one Lord.
Amen. Tapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abin Hawe Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayye Shanke Yahweh Malakwatke Taba'e Rotazawanke Hayye Aisha Baratize Ke Bashemayim Latanan Hawe Lacham Yewam Zad wasalak nawe kabawap nawe kasalak nawe kabawap nawe wala abiyar nawe oh nasayawan above how a shine nawe marakaya lake hamalakwap wa ale wa taparat wa walam aman.
Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. Ha'ai Sharamatazawaf, the Ten Commandments. La'ab, Yahayab, Lakab, Alahayim, Akarim, Alpanyat, La'ab, Thaishab, Lakab, Pasab, Wala'ab, Thibadam, La'ab, Talakwakath, Shamweb, Yahweh, Alahayakab, Lashawat, Zakab, Ath, Hayawam, Hashabath, Lakodashwad, Kabad, Abiyaka wa amaka la'ab taratazak la'ab thana'ab la'ab thaganab la'ab thainat shakur la'ab thachamad ko asherab la'ra'aka aman.
Exodus 20:2. I am the Lord thy power, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy power, am a jealous Father, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. I shall not take the name of the Lord thy power in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy power. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy power gives thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's.
Aman. Yeshua, be seated. Barakate Hawa, by Shimi Hawa Shai, Asharan, Thananawa, Pari Agapan, Tuada Aman. La Yahweh by Shimi Hawa Shai, Af Yashara. English translation. Blessed are Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. And Magwa, Panuay Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Barakata Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakawam, Abiyar, Wanawa, Elyawan, Malak, Shao, Shemayim, Warataza, Wakal, Dabarim, Kayayam, Wagam, Amashiach, Mayahawa, Arawanawa, Ahabnawa, Apala, Yawa Aitaza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawa, Yahawa, Bartazawan. Ainka Yashala Zarnawa Bana Wasa Yashala O Nanawa Yam Yen Aita Kayawamyam Makwadam Babakusha Shalak Mike Allah Watazwadak Alahayam La Maganawa Raparnawa Washama Alnawa Bakwa Shalak Haroka Shal Yawashai Lanawa Lala Magnawa Rabium Kakamat Tabawana Wada Aif Shall the barker basham Yahweh for what if yet why will aman. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living. And also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the Spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natan Lanawa, Hatawarat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natan Lanawa, Awar, Larawat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natan Lanawa, Karan, Hayah, Lakorah, Ha'ain. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the olive oil to anoint Israel. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natan Lanawa, Hasheman, Zayeth, Lamashak, Yasha'ala, Yeshabwa. You see that? Yeah, no doubt. See if what happens with these two. Finally switch these out. Hopefully don't have to do that again.
You're gonna have to use the map here. The map I wanted to get. They said they were supposed to have it in stock. I don't think they're gonna have it because I want a second time.
Okay, look online maybe.
I'm check one more spot. If they don't have it, then I want to see if they have it online.
Okay, so Shalom Yasharala. So Shalom everybody that's here in Philly. Shalom everybody watching us on live stream, and Shalom everyone listening in on teleconference. Welcome to Hashallah Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples found mainly here in the Americas, are the 12 tribes of Israel, and that we fall into a lower state politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God found in the Bible. And that we come at this lower state that we fall into as a people by turning back to these commandments we broke by following Jesus Christ as our example, who taught us the importance of what? Not just faith, but faith with works. Right? The works being what? The keeping of the commandments, to demonstrate that faith. And one of those commandments that we keep is the Sabbath day, which is from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And as our branch of Christ typically does, we do a Sabbath service. This Sabbath, we're going to be going through 1 Maccabees chapters 3 and 4. Once again, 1 Maccabees chapters 3 and 4 are going to be our reading for today. My name is Maccabeus Rubal. I'll be doing the service today. So just write down for your records before we get started. Okay, there we go. That according to the Gregorian calendar that most of the Western world uses, it's the 21st of May, 2022. But according to our calendar, it's the second month and the 22nd day. Once again, 5/21/2022, second month, 22nd day. All right, so let's go to First Maccabees chapter 3. And verse 1. So if you guys remember last time we read Maccabeus, right? Grandson of Hasmon, hence why they call them the Hasmonean dynasty in history. He stood up against the Greek occupation that was coming to take over Jerusalem due to our nation as a people sinning against God. He stood his ground and began a movement against them where him and his sons and others that were like-minded that wanted to follow the law fought against the Greeks, right? A physically stronger force, but they're trusting in the spiritual power that the Most High is going to provide them to overcome. So he dies, but then he gives his final words and passes the torch on to his sons. And out of his 5 sons, we're going to read specifically about one of his sons, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, which just means hammer because he would deliver a hammer-like blow to the enemies. He's going to be the one to take the lead at this point. But as we read on in the Maccabees, we'll see where the other sons come into play as well. And in Lord's will, we'll get to go through that tonight as well, since we know tonight at sundown is going to be the day of Simon. We'll remember Simon, Thassi, another one of Mattathias' sons, right? But for now, let's read about Judas called Maccabeus. So this next little section here, you'll see the parallel record when you go in 2 Maccabees 8, and like the first couple verses, like 1 down to about 8 or 9 or so, parallels we're reading here in 1 Maccabees 3 and 1. But it reads, then his son Judas, called Maccabeus, rose up in his stead. Verse 2, and all his brethren helped him, and so did all they that held with his father. And they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel. Right? So once again, like I mentioned, for this first section here in 1 Maccabees 3, you can just link it with 2 Maccabees chapter 8, 1 down to about, you could probably cut it off at 7. But let me get this specifically for verse 2, 1 Maccabees 3 and 2. In Ecclesiasticus chapter 30, it talks about this as far as when you're older and you have a child to leave behind you. The idea is to what? Be that righteous example unto them so they can carry on in your name after you grow old and give up the ghost. And of course, if that's the Most High, if he blesses you with a long life, right? But this is Ecclesiasticus chapter 30. I'm just going to read from 3 to 6. So Ecclesiasticus chapter 3 in verse 30. 30 in verse 3. Got those reversed. Ecclesiasticus chapter 30 verse 3. It says, he that teacheth his son grieveth the enemy, and before his friends he shall rejoice of him. So I want to read this because we can see the parallels here as far as Maccabeus and how he dealt with his sons, right? He says he greeted the enemy, meaning those other nations and those of our people that wanted to sell out, right, and be sold to do mischief against the Most High, so that they could uh, enjoy the pleasures of a season with the heathen that were coming into power, namely the Greeks at this time. Verse 4, though his father died, yet he is as though he were not dead, for he have left one behind him that is like himself. While he lived, he saw and rejoiced in him, and when he died, he was not sorrowful. He left behind him an avenger against his enemies, and one that shall requite kindness to his friends. Right? So, as you read about Judas Maccabeus, son of Mattathias, we're going to see they definitely fit the role here of what we just read in Ecclesiasticus. So let's go back to 1 Maccabees 3. Let's read on in verse 3. So 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 3, it says, so he gat his people great honor and put on a breastplate as a giant and girt his warlike harness about him and he made battles, protecting the host with his sword. Remember last chapter, as Mattathias gives his sons different commissions, right? When he mentions Judas Maccabeus, he talks about how he was a fighter from his youth. He said, let him be your captain and your champion, right? So he saw that was his forte or his strength. So now Judas Maccabeus exercising his strength as far as being a commander in battle. He says in verse 4, in his acts he was like a lion, and like a lion's whelp roaring for his prey, right? Like a young lion in his prime, right? It says, for he pursued the wicked and sought them out and burnt up those that vexed his people. Wherefore the wicked shrunk for fear of him, and all the workers of iniquity were troubled because salvation prospered in his hand. So those other nations, and even as we're going to read those of our people that sided with them, they shrunk for fear because Judas was standing up for the Most High's truth. And when you do that, you become larger than life, right? And the Most High deals with you. As we even learn that now when we come into the truth, even if it's on a smaller level, it doesn't matter. Once you begin to turn back to the Lord and follow his commandments, the changes begin, right? It says, salvation or deliverance prosper in his hand. It says in verse 7, he grieved also many kings and made Jacob glad with his acts, and his memorial is blessed forever. So we're reading about his memorial now, and it says that he made Jacob glad with his acts, Jacob being Israel, our nation. So the people were made glad by his different feats that he did, right? Trusting in him, but ultimately trusting in the Most High who was working through him, which the Most High does throughout the history of our people, right? And even with the patriarchs and the matriarchs that came before, where when we were in dire straits, when we showed that trust towards the Lord, the Most High would bring us through the toughest of times, as he's doing now with this Judas Maccabeus. And now we have the memorial here to read about. And since we're reading about memorials, I just want to read this verse real quick too, to link with verse 7. Something that we should always be reminded of, and that we always want to show our people, especially those in ignorance, because the perspective again about the Bible is, oh, that's an old book that was written years ago, right? But the thing we know when it comes to the truth is the Bible is timeless, right? The wisdom of the scriptures works in any time, right? Past, present, and the future. So it's always true. You know, yeah, we know what the prophecy says, right? That Daniel gave us. Men shall go to and fro, knowledge shall be increased, right? As they say now, the industrial age, information age. But the Most High truth still remains. Regardless of the tools that we use to get back and forth and to access information, people are still people. Flesh is still flesh, and the spirit is still the spirit. So this is Romans 15 and verse 4. So Romans chapter 15 and verse 4, it reads, whatsoever things were written aforetime, written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. So this history should inspire hope for us to have even now as we face similar challenges of today, right? Of resisting wickedness and those that would do wickedly. So let's go back to 1 Maccabees 3 and read on. So now verse 8, moreover, he went through the cities of Judah, destroying the ungodly out of them and turning away the wrath from Israel, right? Because when we as a people do wickedly, the Most High will what? Have wrath against us. This reminds me a little bit of what we read in Exodus. When we go back to Exodus 32, we see a particular story there where it was Israel. We came out of Egypt, delivered through Moses, right? And Moses went to commune with the Most High on the Mount Sinai, 40 days and nights. And Israel, they got it in their mind to create a God and say, this God made by our own hands delivered us out of Egypt, which wasn't true, thinking that Moses wasn't coming back, right? Erroneously. But now here's a conversation that the Most High had with Moses, being privy of what took place while he was communing with Moses and showing him different things he will write down. I'll just read this real quick in Exodus 32, chapter 32, verse 9. It says, and the Lord, or Yahweh, spake unto Moses, said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people, right? Verse 10, now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. So he's telling Moses, listen, I'm about to cut all these people off and just start over with you. It says, verse 11, and Moses besought Yahweh's power and said, Yahweh, why doeth thy wrath wax hot against thy people? For thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand. Wherefore should the Egyptians speak and say, for mischief did they bring them out, to slay them in the mountains and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from thy fierce wrath and repent of this evil against thy people. Right? So Moses made a case for us to the Most High, right? Thanks for that, right? Because imagine if it was the Most High's will to just cut us off in the wilderness. And then, regardless of what Moses said, it would have been the Most High's will anyway. But what if Most High said, yeah, I agree, Most High, do it. We will be the 12 tribes of Moses, the nation of the Mosesites. But I just want to read this history, just showing how we see the Most High, how his wrath can wax hot, especially when our people go against him. But I think the Most High didn't go that way, right? But he could have done it if he wanted to. It says in verse 13, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, thy servants, to whom thou swearest by thine own self, and saidest unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of will I give unto your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. So Moses was doing what I just read in Romans 15 and 4. Things written aforetime, written for our learning, right? So he went back to the older records, right? The history that took place even before that, right? Saying, remember what you told the patriarchs, right? That you will multiply their seed. So this is part of the prophecy, right? That you gave them, and that now we are partaking in, right? We are the fulfillment of that prophecy. then following verse 14, I'll go back. It says, and Yahweh repented of the evil which he thought to do unto his people. Right. So thanks to Moses, right, for making that case, right, for Israel. But we know ultimately, if it was the Most High's will, he was going to destroy us either way. But he didn't, thank goodness. But yeah, that was Exodus 32. I read from 9 down to 14, but the whole chapter is good to read. But it's the infamous chapter of the golden calf. When we made the golden calf after leaving Egypt. But let's go back to First Maccabees 3. Sorry.
Yeah. At the same time, Moses pleading for the children of Israel is a case that shows even the Most High in his wrath is full of mercy and grace. One got to know how to approach to get that benefit of mercy. And that's pretty much what Moses did. He approached the Most High because he knows he's all merciful. But it's all how we approach it in sincerity. Then, that's part of the holiness of the Most High. Even though he's terrible and if he can wrath due to lawlessness, at the same time, he's all merciful. So all that pretty much covered the whole of, the whole holiness of the Most High. Everything is fully integrated.
Come. And we see here that he's going to show that mercy unto us again, as we see Judas Maccabeus making his moves in righteousness, right? And how it's going to put away that wrath from Israel again, as he stood still for righteousness, as Moses did, right, to fulfill the Most High's will.
And I wanted to read the scripture also.
Oh, okay.
It's in Hebrews chapter 1, in verse 9. Because it says, thou hast loved righteousness and hated iniquity. Therefore, God, even thy God, have anointed thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. The key point I wanted to hone on is the righteousness. The Most High hate. It says the Most High hated iniquity. Iniquity is lawlessness. The Most High hates that. Because of his character, his perfect character, his holiness, he hates lawlessness. And that's pretty much the basis of Judas' fight. His fight against lawlessness. Anybody that stood against the law, against what the Most High established, if the law that shall govern everything, then he go and chase him away. And he also chased away even the renegade of our people, who sided with other, faith and believing in other, law or following other doctrine. He even chased those also, because the earth is the Lord and everything thereof, and he established rules and according to his purpose that we should follow.
Come. Right. So reading on in verse 9, First Maccabees 3 and 9, it says, so that he was renowned unto the utmost part of the earth, and he received unto him such as were ready to perish. Right. Like we read earlier in Ecclesiasticus about the Most High requiting kindness to his friends, right? That avenger to carry on that good name for the righteous father that passed, right? So we see that happening for him. And we see he's getting a name, right? Right? But this name or this fame is righteous. That's where we see in the Hebrew the word sham, right? It means name, but it also can be interchanged with fame, right? That's why you see in the scriptures, he got him a name when he went here, got him a name when he went there to do this, do that, certain feats, right? So he was doing this now. It says in verse 10, then Apollonius gathered the Gentiles together and a great host out of Samaria to fight against Israel. So remember 2 Kings 17, right? Where we have the history behind what happened after the northern kingdom went into captivity, the 10 tribes. How you had the Assyrian government, they imported or brought in other nations, right? Namely Cush, to inhabit that northern region of Israel, right? Which was called Samaria by the northern tribes at first. Later on, it would be called Galilee, and other parts of it would take on other names as it got broken up by new rulers. But this Apollonius, he's gathering these guys to fight against Israel, to fight against our people. It says, which thing when Judas perceived, he went forth to meet him until he smote him and slew him. Many also fell down slain, but the rest fled. Right? So there was this attempt for him to what? Try to fight against Judas Maccabeus and those that are with him. But it tells us here that what? He took them out. It says, wherefore Judas took their spoils and Apollonius' sword also, and therewith he fought all his life long. Right? So kind of similar to, or makes me kind of think of another patriarch that we had, David in particular, where we see him vanquishing an enemy we had back then, namely Goliath, right? A Philistine of Gath, right? A mighty man. But when you read in the history of Samuel's, which we're going to go into as the Sabbaths go forward, since we're reading through Samuel's, we see that he took out that Goliath, and it says he took his sword, cut off his head with his own sword, and then he used that sword going forward as like a memento. So we see that here with Judas fighting against this man Apollonius, taking his sword and doing similar. You can just write down 1 Samuel 21. First Samuel 21, in verse 9, and it reads, and the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, there is none like that. Give it me. Because at this point, remember, David and his men were on the run. He was on the run from Saul because Saul sought his life without a cause. So this is the point of the Most High building up David, right? And to be that next ruler after Saul, and the drama that ensued, because we know it didn't happen overnight. It was many years of him, the two of them going back and forth. But then also in 1 Samuel 22, in verse 10, it says, this is when he had this Edomite named Doeg that sold out David to Saul because he was under Saul's command. I think it says he's one of Saul's herdsmen. It says, and he inquired of Yahweh for him and gave him victuals and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine. So he's pretty much telling on David about him getting the sword from the priests that were at that city, Nob. Let's go back to 1 Maccabees 3. Let's read on in 13. Just want to read that as far as David getting the sword of his enemy, like how we have Jews getting the sword of his enemy. So reading on in 13, it says, now when Saron, a prince of the army of Syria, heard say that Judas had gathered unto him a multitude and company of the faithful to go out with him to war, he said, I will get me a name and honor in the kingdom. For I will go fight with Judas and them that are with him, who despise the king's commandment. The king's commandment being, like we read in the previous chapters, to what? Not worship your own God or that God of Israel, but to worship their gods and to follow their customs. Right? So for 14, we could link this. Proverbs chapter 25 and verse 27. Because when it comes to glory, right? Glory is really a byproduct of good works, right? At least sound glory or righteous glory should be just a byproduct of good works. It's not something that you seek to put upon yourself. But with some of our people, and like we see here with this heathen, when they seek to put it upon himself, it's not a good thing, right? That's why it tells you this in Proverbs 25. Because we got an example of that too in the Maccabees. You have even brothers, not to say they were wicked, but they saw what Judas was doing. And they said, oh, we want to do what Judas is doing. We want to go out and battle too. But they weren't called to do it. But they wanted to do it for what they wanted to do was not necessarily wrong, but why they wanted to do it was had issues, was troublesome, right? And we're going to read what happened to them when they did that. It wasn't good. That's why it tells us this in Proverbs 25 and verse 27. Proverbs 25 and 27, it reads, it is not good to eat much honey. So for men to search their own glory is not glory. Like we're going to read and see. It's one of those things, it's just a byproduct of your works, right? It should be something that just comes for the righteous work that you put in, whatever it may be, as far as the Most High is concerned, whatever your gifts or talents that you've been blessed with, what you've been called to do. It's supposed to come that way, not you doing it out of your own mind, out of your own heart for the glory of men, right? For eye service, to be praised of men, but to the glory of God. So that's Proverbs 25:27. Also, let me read verse 15 and 16 first. It says, so he made him ready to go up, and there went with him a mighty host of the ungodly to help him, and to be avenged of the children of Israel. And when he came near to the going up of Beth Horon, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company, who, when they saw the host coming to meet them, said unto Judas, how shall we be able, being so few, to fight against so great a multitude and so strong, seeing we are ready to faint with fasting all this day, right? So they've been fasting for that help and that succor of the Most High. And they saw how physically this force that this Saron was come with was mightier, bigger, right? They had more manpower, right? But then they had more spiritual power. So they're asking Judas this question, right? It says in verse 18, unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter for many to be shut up in the hands of a few. And with the Lord or the power of heaven, it is all one, to deliver with a great multitude or a small company. For the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of an host, but strength cometh from heaven, right? They come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us and our wives and children and to spoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws, right? So that goes to what I think Kahan you pulled earlier, right? About how the Most High doesn't like lawlessness, right? So they want to embrace the Most High's laws. Wherefore the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be ye not afraid of them, right? So wise, encouraging words coming from Judas Maccabeus to encourage his men against this larger host, right? Very reminiscent again of Samuel's. Let me get that real quick to link with verse 22. And then I'll share a visual aid with you guys just so we can kind of get a picture of what we're looking at here. But this is 1 Samuel. First Samuel chapter 17. I'll just start from 45 to kind of get to it. I just want to get David's words in this exchange. But look at what he tells him. And it's that same spirit of what? Trusting in the Lord, even though he's dealing with a mightier, stronger foe, right? It says in 1 Samuel 17 and 45. Then said David to the Philistine, referring to Goliath, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the power of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will Yahweh deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. You read above, he's pretty much returning his words back to him. This was a taunt that Goliath was throwing at Israel. I think it tells you for 40 days and nights, right? Because no one wanted to fight him until David stood up. Verse 47, all the assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, right? Just like Judas was telling his men when it came to Sarai and his mightier force. For the battle is Yahweh's, and he will give you into our hands, right? So I'll stop there, but you get the idea. So that's how the battle ultimately is won. Does it mean you still don't take logistics into account? You still don't count the cost of things when it comes to, how much money something's going to cost as far as a goal you want to pursue, or how much manpower you need to achieve a victory? No, of course those things matter, right? But the ultimate thing is to what? When those things fail, ultimately that's the Lord is going to bless the work of your hands. So you still work those things out to the best that you can. Then when those things fail, that's where the Lord becomes your ultimate fail-safe. So that's what's key. You see, with the men that are in the world, all they can trust in is what their physical strength. And if they don't have that, they just flee, or they just do something else, right? Or they just, take the knee because they just say, oh, well, I guess that's that. He's physically got the advantage on me, right? So I got no other options. Whereas with Israel, we've always got another option. So I'll just share this real quick. You can find this online. It's like part of the public domain. It's this group that did it. They're called what is this thing called? It's pretty much a Bible atlas of the Access Foundation. So let me just share this real quick. And I zoomed in, so hopefully you guys can see it. Let's see here. So this is the section. This is 91A of this, and I'm going to go to 92 of this Bible Atlas by the Access Foundation. If you just Google it and just look up the PDF, you can get this. But this is just a map of the cities at the times of what we're reading during the time of the Maccabees and the Maccabean revolt. It says here as a subcaption, first and second Maccabees, right? What we're reading through now. In 168 BC, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who reigned from 175 to 164 BC, right? So that's the time frame that we're in right now as far as what we're reading. Set up an altar to Zeus in a temple at Jerusalem. We just read that a couple Sabbaths ago. This led to a Jewish uprising under the leadership of the priest Mattathias of Modin. It's kind of spelled different here, but that's Judas's father. And his 5 sons, the most prominent of whom was Judas Maccabeus, who the subject is we're reading today, from whom the movement took its name. After more than 2 decades of fighting, Judea achieved independence as a kingdom under Syrian rule. It's kind of funny way it's written. How can you be independent under Syrian rule? But it's kind of funny it mentions Syria, since we know we're fighting against the Syrians here. It says its royal dynasty was known as the Hasmonean, after Hasmon, grandfather of Mattathias, as we discussed. Now, as we get down here, make sure we get as much zoom as possible here. All right, so we got, oops. All right, there we go. So it says selected events in the Maccabean Revolt, 168 to 142. So we care about these solid red line. The dash red line is what Mattathias and his sons did. But as we go down here, if you see right above here where it says Labona, right above at the top of the red plot of land, it mentions here as a subcaption, Judas defeats Apollonius at the ascent of Labona or Lebana, and it says 167 BC, which is what we just read. And then as you come down here, you'll see these circles with swords going through them, or different battles. It says Judas defeats Saron at Beth Horon Pass, 166 BC. Just kind of give you an idea of the time frame that we're in, right, and the location of where these things are taking place. But we'll revisit this atlas as we go through the events of the Maccabees. But just wanted to show you that there, just that you see kind of where they're at in the land, because oftentimes we'll read and we'll see, so and so went here and took this city and renamed it this, and then spread its borders to this, and then renamed it that, and all that. So Bible Atlas, one of our essential tools that we use as complements to the scriptures to get further insight, so that in your mind's eye you can kind of see what's going on as you read. But let's continue on in First Maccabees 3. Kind of got a spoiler there that he won this battle, but we didn't read it exactly yet. We just saw his words of encouragement to his people. But let's actually read what takes place next. It says in verse 23, 1 Maccabees 3:23, now as soon as he had left of speaking, he leapt suddenly upon them. And so Saron and his host was overthrown before him, as we just looked at on the map. And they pursued them from the going down of Beth Horon unto the plain, where were slain about 800 men of them. And the residue fled into the land of the Philistines, right? So they came downward and then sent them packing, right? This stronger force. How embarrassing, right, for those heathen. But it's a shame, because we know we're all supposed to be serving the Lord, but especially Israel, and it should always be that way. But sadly, throughout our history, from then till now, majority of our leaders have not followed the Lord and trusted in him, especially when it counts. It says, then began the fear Judas and his brethren, and exceeding great dread to fall upon the nations round about them. So it shouldn't be surprising if we know the contract, if we know what the Most High promised us. What did he promise us? Let's go back. Deuteronomy chapter 2. This is one of the things the Most High said he would do as long as we upheld our end of the bargain, the contract, the covenant, keeping his laws. The Most High said he would do this for us. This is Deuteronomy chapter 2 in verse 24. It says, rise ye up, take your journey and pass over the river Arnon. This is going back during the time of Moses again. We were traveling in the wilderness still and fighting different battles. Pass over the river Arnon. Behold, I have given into thine hand Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to possess it, and contend with him in battle. 25. This day will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations that are under the whole heaven, who shall hear report of thee and shall tremble and be in anguish because of thee. You see that? So, you know, that's a key thing the Most High is doing here for us to help us out. Because even when you're dealing with a stronger force, even if you got to deal with a force that's got more munitions, it's got more people, if they're afraid to fight, you clearly have an advantage, right? We can even see that on a carnal level when we witness different sports or athletics, right? Where you have different opponents afraid of the other. And the other opponent may have trained and prepared and been physically fit to actually defeat them, but because of that fear and dread, they take that L still. And it didn't just start with Moses. This goes even back to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'll get this other one too, and then we'll continue. Check this out. This is Genesis. Genesis chapter 35. Genesis chapter 35. I'll start from 1 and read down to 5. This is after the brothers, the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, took out Shechem and his whole city of men after they forced our sister Dinah, right? And then said, "Oh, well, can I take her to wife?" And then they came with the clever yet vicious stratagem to say, "Yeah, you can take our sister to wife, but we have a custom of circumcision. If you do that, yeah, no problem." And then after they did that, it says they were still sore. Simeon Levi went to town and took all the men out in that city. And then that's when Jacob was just like, "Oh, he calls me to stink upon the land," right? Clearly we're outnumbered, that there's more of them than us. And then the brothers were like, should they deal with our sister like an harlot? So it's one of those tough situations where you kind of see both perspectives. And, Jacob, of course, would feel some kind of way as well. And that happened to his own daughter. But this is Genesis 35 and 1. It says, "And power said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother." So it called back to when he was a little younger. And he laid his head on those stones and saw that ladder. Verse 2, Jacob said unto his household and all that are with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. Right? So we see this understanding even back then about not dealing with other gods. Right? And, laws of cleanness, uncleanness. Because Moses wrote it down, but the knowledge was there before, right? It goes all the way back to Adam. Then it says, "Let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods that were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem." But now here's the key in verse 5, right? It says, "And they journeyed," it says, "and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob," right? So, yeah, Jacob had a legitimate concern, them being outnumbered. But even still, the Most High looked out for his people, even when they were just a smaller family. So it doesn't matter if it's just a handful of us, right? Or if there's a whole bunch of us, right? The Most High can put that fear and dread on the nations round about us, right? Which pretty much will, shut them down in their tracks and then just give us that advantage. And if he doesn't, he can still give us what? The spirit of might and strength, right? And skill of combat to what? Take out our enemies too. He can do both. But yeah, that's Genesis 35. I read from 1 to 5. Let's go back. And then we could link that with verse 25. I didn't want to pull that at first. I'm just adding this here. Let's see. Okay, good. All right. So let's continue on. First Maccabees 3 and 26. Insomuch as his fame came unto the king, and all nations talked of the battles of Judas. Right? So word was getting around about this Judas, not only to the Greeks, but to the Romans, who were an up and coming force, as well as other kings who were in power at that time. Right? Word was getting around about this Judas and what he was doing to fight for Israel. Right? 27. Now, when King Antiochus heard these things, and remember this Antiochus is the fourth we read about before. Epiphanes, which his surname meaning God manifest. That's how proud he was, right? To see himself as a God manifest on earth. It says, he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. He opened all his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them, right? So he's bringing his force together. He said he even gave them in advance, right? Like, I'm going to pay you for battles you haven't even fought yet, just so that I keep you guys at my attention in case I need to call you into battle when the time is right. We can do it.
Right. So eventually, the fight is to get to the king. It's to get to the person who actually ruled a territory according to his will, according to his purpose and intent. So all that Maccabeus is doing right there is to eventually get to the king, because the king influenced the citizen with his own pretty much the lifestyle of the citizen reflects, or the people reflects, the culture, values, moral values, and nature of the king. So once the king is taken down, then you can establish a law based on your king, or whatever king is and that's pretty much what Maccabeus is doing. He knows that the Lord is the king of the earth. So now eventually to get to this king right here, once you dethrone that king, then you can establish your law, statutes, and everything, so that you can influence you can influence the people.
Come. We even see the heathens understand that too, right? Back in chapter 2, when they first came to where Mattathias was, right? Mm-hmm. They said, "Oh, you're an elder man in this community. What do you say you eat this, wear this, do this, right? Like us."
Right.
So
yeah, whoever has dominion over the people, that's the one that you got to influence. Mm-hmm. And once you take that, then you can have the king. The king will rule according to his own will. Mm-hmm. And the citizens or the people will have no choice but to reflect the lifestyle of the king.
Yeah, because even from a logistic standpoint, right? It makes sense. So you don't have to go to war. You can just what they call it when a place is annexed. It's like you don't battle with it, but the leaders of whatever that place is, they sit down and they break bread and they go, okay, look, won't destroy us, but whatever you want, we'll make concessions. And they figure out something, and then that place just becomes part of the continuation of that king's empire, the one that annexed the other smaller kingdom.
Right. That's what that the whole thing of colonies. When they become a colony of that of the king.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The colony is pretty much the possession of a king, and the people just abide by the king's rules, even though they may be from a distant place. And that's pretty much what the Most High is doing with the earth. Is to have the earth as an extension to the heavenly realm and extend it to earth, in which explains it that in Matthew 6 and 9, right, that will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You colonize it, and then the people don't. The king doesn't have to. For example, the people in Jamaica, in Barbados, those countries that were colonized by England, the queen never had to show up there, but everything reflects the king's, the queen values. They pray to the queen, they practice the lifestyle of the queen, but yet the queen never stepped foot, on that island. So it's the same thing here. Even though we may not see the Most High never had to come here, but we have because the earth is the Lord's and His King. Therefore, we have to pray to Him. We have to give Him glory, even though we never see Him, physically. But the closest we'll come to Him is Yahushua would be the King of the earth.
Right. Kun, you got me thinking about Psalms 2, right? 7-9, where it says, ask of me. I'll declare the decree. The Lord has said unto me, thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. And he says, ask of me, I'll give thee the heathen for thine inheritance and the uttermost coast for thy possession, right? Mm-hmm. So he's given all that power to his son, right here, right? The people and the lands that they have, right? Which is kind of funny because when Satan tempted Christ, right, when he was fasting, he offered him the same. The only caveat being to bow down before him. Right. Most High and Christ is like, no, Most High already gave that to me. So I'm going to go to you to get that, right? And then break the law in the process. Mm-mm. Yeah, look forward to it. Look forward to the fall of this reign. All right. Yeah, let's, where do we leave off?
26. 27.
All right, the water. So 27, and when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. He opened also his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them. Nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures were failed, and that the tributes in the country were small because of the dissension and the plague which he had brought upon the land and taken away the laws which had been of old times. So you see, the Most High is working things for our favor, but against him, right? For coming against us in righteousness, right? To now what? Bringing even a plague upon him as far as the countries he had dominion over that he would get resources from to redistribute, right? So it's easy for the Most High to do that, right? Especially when it's a wicked kingdom. For our sake, and just even against its own kingdom for its own wickedness, right? Like we always said, even if Christ didn't come back, right, anytime soon, right, we could easily witness the downfall of these governments that are here right now because of their own wickedness, right? It's like you're doing that all by yourself, digging your own grave. It says he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before. For he had abounded above the kings that were before him. So you go into the history of the Antiochus before him, and I think he had another guy named Demetrius Soter, going all the way back to Seleucus, right, who was the first one during the time of Alexander, right? he had the preeminence, but now that thing's starting to get reversed. And it's the same king that Daniel talked about, that little horn that Daniel prophesied about, like we read last time in the Sabbath, back in Daniel 8. It says, wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go to Persia, there to take the tributes of the countries and to gather much money. So he said, let me pick off some resources from Persia, because remember, that was part of the dynasty under Seleucus. Then it says, which was, he was part of that same dynasty too. So he said, okay, calling all provinces, cough up your money. We need that money because I got to deal with this Judas guy. So he left Lysias, a nobleman and one of the blood royale, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates unto the borders of Egypt, right? Because remember, going toward the river Euphrates, that was the Seleucids, but then going towards the borders of Egypt, that was the Ptolemaic dynasty. Like we read in the previous chapters, you had a time when the Seleucids wondered what the Ptolemaic dynasty had and took them out for a moment. It says, and to bring up his son Antiochus until he came again. So he had this Lysias pretty much be like a guardian or a caretaker over his son, the fifth Eupator, as he gathered his money to what? Come against Judas.
And another thing is in verse 29, this shows the limit of the kings of the earth, right? At the time, or even now, that they have economic problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something that what we're seeing now. It's always been an issue when it comes to resources because they have limit in terms of what they have. This shows that they don't have full control over any resources where they can have an abundant economy, right? And as opposed to the Mosai's economy where it's limitless, there's no limit, it's fully in abundance, right? Only even though people complain that man, it's too many people looking for work, but in the Mosai's kingdom, the labors are few, but the resources are plenteous, but the labors are few. Right? When they talking about unemployment here, people losing jobs, but in Mosai's kingdom, the economy, there's no shortage of resources. It's just there's shortage of labor.
Mm-hmm.
So it's total opposite from what we have now. It's scarcity versus abundance.
Come. Like I said before, I look forward to it.
Matthew 9:37. The labors are few, but there's plenteous in the Mosai's kingdom. In the concept of the Mosai's kingdom. So he faced problem here. That's already an economic problem because he was looking at defeating Judas with resources. He looking at the men rather than the cause of why the man is fighting, and even whatever they put against him, he defeated them. Instead of saying, man, maybe something is wrong, maybe we're doing something wrong. The way we govern, the way we're doing things, maybe, things are not working right, but they looking at the man rather than the spirit upon that man that caused them to be, enraged, against the stuff that they're looking at, their wickedness.
Yeah, come. What was that again?
That was Matthew 9:37.
Okay, so we can link that with verse 30.
Right. Right. It's like the Most High always on time, and he never wastes things. But there's plenteous. Even though there's plenteous, he still don't waste. He gave according to measure that anybody can manage. So very well organized, system, economic system as far as the Most High is concerned.
Yeah, come. You would think if he's the creator of heaven and earth, he would know how to handle his creation.
Come. It's like when we talking about inflation here, things are going up here. In the Mosai's economy, inflation is not even a thing because cost is immaterial when it comes to the Mosai. It's not even about cost. It's about, what can you manage? And then that's pretty much, what the Mosai's kingdom is all about. So there's no such thing as inflation in the Mosai's kingdom.
Right. It goes to what we were talking about before, as far as the Mosai will always have a value exchange, right? As far as the nations go, they earn that. Why is this thing keeps freezing? They earn that usury being used on them, right? They don't realize that's a reflection on their actions, right? Whereas how we exchange with each other, we wouldn't charge usury one towards another, right? It's like you said, the Most High, He's the one that created everything. It's His resources anyway. Our law forces us to acknowledge it. Them, they see things as, oh, it's mine, right? I'm doing this. So it's like they're already starting off on the bad foot. And then when they get stressed out like He is here, with all His stuff, being disease ridden and the plague spreading, He's not going to the real man in charge, right? And we see we're going to see just how it's going to affect them going forward. So yeah, Romans 15:4, can't emphasize that enough. So let's continue on. It says, verse 34, moreover, he delivered unto him the half of his forces and the elephants, and gave him charge of all things that he would have done, is also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem, to wit, that he should send an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away the memorial from that place. So now you're really messing up, guy, right? It's like, how's the expression go? If every you feel like you have to use a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? Like he's got the carnal outlook, right? If I just throw more weight at it, right? If I just throw more soldiers at it, more tanks at it, right? In this case, elephants, but serves the same purpose. More engines of war at it,
right,
then maybe I'll get the victory. And it's just like you don't get how this works.
Right. It's a case of corruption. That's pretty much what it is. It's using the people's money for his own interests, right? Use the resources. So he feels like he's not gonna have enough to buy the people out, to get people on his side. It's pretty much like it's corruption. He won't be able to get those people and misuse the money, and so that he can get his way, so he can keep himself in power.
And you trying to take their memorial away? Nah, man, that's where they belong. It's where they're supposed to be. And who would think, even in 2022, the drama that we see that's been happening there, two nations fighting over land that isn't theirs, and how they had quiet, never had peace. Now they don't even have quiet. And it all goes back to what the Most High said when it came to us. Don't lay a hand on us. Don't cause us prophets any harm. It's all tied to all the drama that they got going on right now, even to this day. How ironic. It says in verse 36, and that he should place strangers in all their quarters and divide their land by lot. So the king took okay, I didn't read this. So the king took half of the forces that remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city, the 147th year, and having passed the river Euphrates, he went through to the high countries. Oh, that's what I wanted to link for 35 real quick. You can link this with 36. So this is Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 7. Which reads, your country is desolate, your cities are burned with fire, your land strangers devour in your presence, and it is desolate as overthrown by strangers. And then also Psalms 83. So a little a little prophecy there for Isaiah. Psalms 83 and 4, which says, they have said that they above is the nations, right? Or our enemies, which are the other nations, according to Numbers 24 and 8. Psalms 83 and 4, they have said, come, let us, the nations, cut them, us, Israel, off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. See that? So these heathen are following suit. These Greeks are doing what we even see here. They've always wanted to do that. And they have all the liberty to do so as long as we're disobeying the Most High. As you go down, of course, it goes into the nasty laundry list, right, of all those nations. And as you go through that list, you know, we're dealing with our people at camp. They'll be like, well, hold on, I got. You see these heathens, right? I got friends that are heathens. I got friends that are white people, Asian, African, this, that, and the third. You know, in my workplace, I have acquaintances that are heathens that are nice to me, that, you know, go to my children's birthday parties and da-da-da-da, right? You go through that list, it's like, oh, there's that nation, there's that nation, there's that nation. You have to explain to our people, you know, anyone's going to be nice to you or have good manners when they know they have the advantage. We were talking about that, I think, in the last Tuesday class. It's like, you know, you'll see that in the workplace if you had that experience, where you'll see the heathen, they'll be real nice to Israel that works at a job when they're not on the same level, right? They work in the mail room, or they might work at the security or the front desk. They'll be real nice, you know, but then let you be on par with them, right? Let you be, you know, on the same level as them as far as you guys could compete for the same position. See the heathen act very differently, right? Instead of being, you know, all nice and, you know, asking about the family when you see them in the workplace, you know, they'll ghost you. And you might wave, they just kind of look right past you, and then you might ask them about it later. I don't know what happened. But it's just like, oh, okay, now your true colors are coming out because, you know, they feel threatened by you. It's just like, you should just been up front even when I was underneath you. That's the thing. That's what they'll do. They'll be nice when they know that they have the advantage. But once you are on a comparable level with them or can excel above them, you know, you really get to see their character. That's why you had your hand up.
It's the same with what you talking about, study part.
Mm-hmm.
And the writings on the wall, you can see how each empire fall based on the action they take, and it's repeating itself right here in this verse right here. Rather than looking at the essence for why everything is going on, the focus is on the individual. Like the individual is the troublemaker. So now you see the action they take is the same thing that Pharaoh of Egypt. That's what he did. His heart got hardened. Instead of reconsider, the Mosai through his wicked, because he is wicked, his heart got, you know, hardened, and then keep making move that's gonna take him down, you know, in a set fashion. So that's pretty much what's going on here with this king. So the breaking down of a king.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the links that I wanted, but let me continue. It says, so the king took the half of the forces that remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city, the 147th year, and having passed the river Euphrates, he went through the high countries. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy, son of Dorimenes, and Nicanor, and Gorgias, mighty men of the king's friends. And with them he sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah and to destroy it as the king commanded, right? So they got them a nice squad here, right? That they think is that'll be able to do Judas in,
Right.
right? So we got 40,000 infantry, as they say, footmen, and then we got 7,000 cavalry or horsemen, right, to go and take them out.
Yep. Same thing happening right now. When you see the NATO
Mm-hmm.
and you see, even though we people crying broke here, inflation is rising, and you see Biden go to Congress and trying to get 20 billion so he can go somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
and then now trying to ally with open up the Cuban. Now people can travel to Cuba, looking for ally, looking to be on good terms. He went to Venezuela, the country he was at odds with, try to see how he can, get the oil. Right? So it's pretty much the same thing. And then when the empire is falling, you're gonna see all this action. And those actions are being taken right now, right before our eyes, as we're reading right here.
Yeah.
So everything's happening exactly the same, not exactly the same way, but it's the same pattern that you're seeing right now.
Exactly, and for the same reason.
Right. So neglecting the people here, now food shortage, then you're gonna have a riot that's gonna happen here just because of food and inflation, everything right there in your turn. So everything is being set up, for the destruction of the empire.
Come. And not to go, so much into it now, but the mainstream media isn't talking about it, but alternative media is going into it as far as a number of nations, even the fake nation of Israel included, is they're all stepping away from the U.S. dollar, right? They're trying to trade resources in the Eastern Bloc countries over there, Russia and others like that. And the EU is trading with, willingly trading with Russia to get natural gas using their ruble. But you don't hear about that like at all, right? In the Western media, right? Because the whole way they have to paint Russia is, Russia bad. Anything that Russia does, money they use, the resources that they have, we have to sanction them off, cut them off. But the EU is like they're between a rock and a hard place. Their people need resources, and they got a neighbor that's much closer that can provide those things. So it's just like the enemy of my enemy isn't necessarily my enemy, when it comes to that. And like I said, the U.S., the Western media doesn't want to talk about it, but it's happening. Because what are you gonna do? But yeah, how's the quote go? Knowing the truth, we know the depth behind the quote, but it's true. They say, kind of what you were saying before, Khan. It's the history doesn't repeat, but it does. But it sure does rhyme. People say Mark Twain said it. But I'm not sure if it's him that said it, but that's the idea, But we understand the why it rhymes, and that's what we're talking about now. It's disobedience. It's we always mention the three things, right? As far as Esau's downfall, any empire's downfall, but especially Esau now, is they oppress God's people, right? Kill us in the northern tribes. They set up a false state of Israel, claim to be God's people, right? That's a strike two. And the third strike is their own government is based on, Hamites, what the Hamites did, and all their idols. They just took the Hamites' idols from Egypt and Babylon and just put their faces on them. So those three things there, like the heavy nails in their coffin, to just seal the deal for these guys. They got to reverse those three key things. They got to stop those things to even have a chance. But their whole success is dependent on them continuing to oppress us, keep the false state of Israel going, and set up Hamite idols.
Right. And also, you got to look at the higher level things that are at play. All the moves are being moved. All the chips are being moved, and some people might think there's a disagreement between China and the U.S. and on the surface, that's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Russia disagreeing with U.S. On the surface, that's what it looks like, because it looks like people against people, right? But the spirit behind them agree on every move that each one of is making because they're in unison.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the spirits that's moving them, that's exactly what they want them to do. They're in agreement. But the people being used to think that, you know, they are against each other, this, that, and the third. They might even think that in the flesh that they are really against each other. But they are being moved by a spirit behind them that's using, you know, them the spirit of Satan moving them. They're already in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And you see China is making move that's like going against his people, against their people, but at the detriment of America. Because if China don't work, the Chinese don't work, U.S. don't get import. Right? And U.S. consume a large amount of what the world produces. So if the people in China, you know, not working to produce and to send stuff here and across the globe, I mean, I hone in on China because China is one of the largest exporters of stuff to the U.S.
Right.
Then, as those people are on lockdown in China, it affects the U.S.
Right. And BBC and the CNN trying to make fun of them, going, "Oh my goodness, look at them because of their COVID outbreak."
Right.
And it's just like, look at them.
Right.
You better help. What you're saying is on point. Like, if they stop, then everything stops.
Yeah, everything stops because they got cheap labor. The stuff that they working for, the amount they working for, people in the U.S. won't work for that amount.
Exactly.
Because it won't be able to sustain the U.S. Lifestyle, and because of how expensive things are, right? But if they stop working over there, then it affect the U.S. Right. So on the surface, if we look in there on the surface, it's like everything like they're against each other, but the spirit, they agree on how things are moving because that's prophecy.
Come. We can't emphasize that enough, folks. I know we're kind of talking about stuff going on now, but relating it back to what we're reading here in Maccabees, because the theme is, Romans 15:4. Things written aforetime written for our learning. So that's why we're talking about these things. But we can't emphasize that enough, from the 70s up until now. Don't fall for that media, trick. If you hear it or hear family and friends talking about it, oh, China's taking our job, China's doing this. No, that was part of the deal. It was always part of the deal. The big fish, going back to the Kissinger days, and I can't believe how this guy is still around, right? This guy's like been an advisor to the last 7-8 presidents, right? Going back to that time, that he was one of those big players in exchanging the American innovation technology for the Chinese cheap labor. Right? So they say, oh, China is trying to steal our technology and copy this and copy that. That was part of the deal. So you hear politicians talk that nonsense, see right through it and know that they're trying to play a game. They're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Yeah, that's a big one. But like I said, they still, you still hear people saying that. And it's just like, how ignorant do they really think we are? But clearly a lot of folks got amnesia, or they never knew. But first Maccabees chapter 3, now we're in verse 40, right? We read about the forces. Oh, let me read this real quick, and then we'll continue on. This is just what we're talking about before, as far as it's not to say that Christ isn't saying to not deal in logistics. He is, but the ultimate thing is what? The Most High being the key part of the equation for any formula that you use or any calculations that you make before making the decision. So that's the key. So we still do it. It's just the heathen they only trust in those calculations, as opposed to the Most High, who's one that will allow whatever your vision is to be successful. He gives these two parables to show why it's important to ask How much will this cost, or how many will I need to do this? This is Luke chapter 14. Okay, there we go. Pages are kind of thin. Like, I didn't want to pass it. Okay, here we go. Luke chapter 14. I'll start from verse 28. Now, the overall message here, he's saying that what? In order to be my disciple, you have to know, or you have to be able to consider what you're willing to give up, right? That might cost you things that are near and dear to you to be my disciple, right? But he's going to use these parables as like just metaphors to consider it. Same way you would on the physical level, consider it on a spiritual level when it comes to what it costs to be my disciple. So this is Luke 14 and 28. He says, "For which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and count the cost, whether ye have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he have laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish." So this is how much, right? So we definitely want to check the price, right, on certain things before we pursue them to say, do I have the means to actually see this through with the resources I have at hand, right? You've probably seen examples of this of, you might be in a neighborhood and you might go by a place, or might be in your own neighborhood, and you see they put the mesh up on the walls, right? You can tell they're getting ready to probably do stucco on the side of the wall. They put the mesh up. Hell, they may even have the what do you call them? I can't remember the name of those planks they set up when they're working on the outside of a building. But you'll see them start to work. You go by another week later, and you still see the mesh on the wall nailed in to they put the stucco, and even the God, I can't remember the name of those things that you set up. But the things you set up pretty much that you can go up and down and like paint at each level or plaster at each level. But weeks go by, and they just didn't finish the job for one reason or another. The contractors, got pulled into some other assignment. And they didn't finish that one, or the company went out of business. Who knows, right? People will take note of that and go, "Well, what's going on here?" They started working, but then now it's just there and it's just undone. Yeah, hand up.
Thank you.
Then it says in the next part, this dealing with how many, right? Or as far as like head count, as you get word, what they say, capital or capitation, right? That word comes from cap, which is Latin for pretty much head, like a head count. They say capita. It literally comes from the word which just means head, or how many people that you have. Like human resources, butts and seats, right? As they say, how many butts and seats you got in this department? It says, "Well, what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consult whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000?" Right? So how many? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth an ambassage and desire conditions of peace. Right? To say, look, he's got twice as many as I do. Let's see if we can work something out so we don't have to expand each other's resources, right?
In Maccabees, in Judah's case, they showing us all the expense and the problem that they're going through to get prepared. Mm-hmm. But the Most High will supply Judas with what he needs as he needed. And it's going to be on time. It's not going to be late. It's going to be on time exactly when he needed to face the enemy. So that's the good management system. So what we're describing here is a problem with, management and understand the concept of where, you draw your ideas from. So the ideas of how to fight them, Judas is not even worrying about that, because what he's fighting for is pretty much a noble cause that would give him all the necessary things he needs to fight the fight. And that's the beauty of fighting the Most High's model. You will supply your need as you work, and you don't even have to worry about that. As long as you apply yourself, or you make yourself available to get the job done, you don't have to worry about the logistics and how things gonna come about. But the key is to be aware who you're fighting for.
Mm-hmm. Come. So that was Luke 14. I read from 28 down to 32. I linked that with 39. But let me continue on in verse 40. So they went forth with all their power and came and pitched in Emmaus in the plain country. And the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria and of the land of the Philistines joined themselves unto them, right? So they know that Antiochus is the big bad boy on the block at that time, right? Since the Greeks are the dominant empire, they received word and are witnessing this great force, and it's kind of like the what do you call it? The bystanders kind of see like an army marching going a certain way, and they all kind of look and go, "Oh, is somebody in trouble now?" Right? And then them being gambling men, they said, let me see if I can make a profit off of their downfall, right? As the Jews get taken over again. So they said, let me see if we can, partake in the spoils, right? Let me get in on the action. Hence them looking to buy some children of Israel for slaves, right? So yeah, Psalms 83 through and through, right? It says, now when Judas and his brethren saw that miseries were multiplied, that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them, right? Or like this word you see, not so much used now, but you see this word, vanquished. They were vanquished. They want to vanquish them. They said one to another, let us restore the decayed estate of our people, and let us fight for our people and the sanctuary, right? Because remember, that was the motivation. Because I heard other brothers say it before, whatever state the temple was in, and the altar was usually a reflection of the state of the people. So if the temple was set up nice and the altar was there, right, and the sacrifice were happening, that meant Israel was on point. But if the temple was overthrown and demolished or destroyed, and the altar was messed up, then that usually was a reflection of it was usually a reflection of the state of the people. So they want to restore this, right? Since they restored themselves spiritually by going back to the Most High, they want to restore the temple as well, which is like that physical representation of the Most High on earth, to which we were saying earlier, Khan, as far as the manner of the ruler is, so are the people, right? As the manner of the temple of Israel is, so is the people. Oh, and Thawada Akwath in the chat. That's what I couldn't remember that word. Scaffolding, right? You'll just see us sitting there, with the mesh. You're just like, when these guys gonna finish their job? What's going on here? Yeah. Khan. So it says 40. Yeah, I read that. 44. Then was the congregation gathered together that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. We were talking about that earlier too, right? The fruits of the Spirit, we're privy to know what they are and to have them bestowed upon us, right? And to take them on. But remember, they're His fruits of the Spirit. You talk about faith, that's the Most High's faith. We talk about being patient, that's the Most High's patience. We talk about charity, that's the Most High's charity. We talk about mercy, grace, that's the Most High's mercy. That's the Most High's grace. Those are all His characteristics. That's why our head as men should be Christ, and we see Christ in action. He exhibits all those things in perfection, right? He's that goal that we all want to achieve, right? And as we achieve it, the women who we're their head, they can then be inspired by us. But how can they be inspired by us if we're not inspired by Christ? Right? It's going to be disarray. But yeah, those characteristics, those character traits, we all want to exude. That's what makes us like Christ, which in turn makes us like the Most High, right? So these are all His characteristics, right? And we could do a whole, we could do classes on each of those characteristics, but it's just something we just need not to be forgetful of, right? That they're His mercy, right? They're His ways.
And this right here, it goes against logic. Meaning logic is good to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. But at this point right here, you have so much against you, then you can and gather together and you pray. That doesn't make sense logically.
Exactly.
But the thing is, to the Most High, it all makes sense because that's his fight.
Right.
So he's responsible to give us the gear and everything we need, right, to fight. But at the end, the Most High only got to speak, and then the fight is over.
Mm-hmm.
Let there be light, and the light is created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. That's what we read earlier with David. He said, "The battle is the Lord's." Right. It's just him. His speech back to Goliath just gave that insight into what was going on. You know, that he knew that too. You know, it's not me beating Goliath; it's the Most High. Right. That's why he was so offended. Like, how are you going to talk about God's army like that? You know what? Most High has something in store for you, right? And sure enough, took them out. So let's see Judas take these Greeks out and the others that want to partner with them. 45. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down. The aliens kept the stronghold. The heathen, remember, aliens just means like outsiders, right? Strangers. It's kind of funny. We see chariots, right? People say, "Oh, UFO," or now they say UAP, right? Unidentified aerial phenomena. That's the new term they like to use. Aliens. When it's like, no, actually, you're the alien. They've been here longer than us. They were here before we were here. You know, they're the ones that built all this, and they're the ones going back and forth, to and fro on the earth all the time. You know, it's just so proud how people, they just want to say what does and doesn't exist based on their own limited experience. You know what I mean? That's why I tell anyone that comes to the camp talking about, "Oh, I'm an atheist." It's just like, that's not even scientific. You know, that's you making not even an educated guess. Just because you can't prove something doesn't mean you can deny its existence. You know, at best, I'll give you agnostic. You know, you won't deny it, but you just say you can't prove it. At least I'll at least give you the benefit of the doubt for saying that. But it's not a very scientific thing to claim atheism, right? Just from a scientific standpoint, there's so many colors, things that go below what our eyes can see and above what our eyes can see. For you to be proud enough, for you to be so proud to say, "Oh, there's nothing else," who are you to claim that? But yeah, reading on. Because we know what Psalms 14:1 tells us, right? The fool in his heart says there's no God. It says, the aliens kept their stronghold, the heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mizpah. You'll see it sometimes spelled as Mitzpah, like Mitzpah in the 66 books, over against Jerusalem, for Mizpah was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel. Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes and laid open the book of the law wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. Check that out. Wow. So we see Israel doing what we're supposed to do in righteousness, right? We want to seek out the Lord, right? We humble ourselves before the Most High. We pray. We obey, we pray, we fast, right? So that we can what? Hopefully gain the Most High's favor to help us through whatever hardship is coming, right? Whatever affliction is coming. But then look what it says. They were reading the book of the law, which is good. But then it says, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. Called it, called out. What do the heathen do? Not only for our culture, which is the scriptures, they do it for other cultures too. Now you look at these different books, movies, music, right? That you see, they'll take the customs of the other dark nations, right, and try to cover them or repaint them or recast them to make them look like them. Like you go to Egypt, you go to Syria, you go to these other places, they'll try to do that. Some nations, they kind of put the brakes on it, but you'll then see them trying to emulate what's done here in the West as far as how Esau looks, as far as you know their features, the way their hair is, the way their eyes are, the way their skin is, their height. They'll try to modify themselves, right, with different types of creams and surgeries and stuff like that to look and be like them. And it's ridiculous, but that's what Esau's got going on. And he just kind of sits back and goes, what? No one told him to do that. And it's like, no, you already, you know what you're doing when it comes to this, strength of your skin, trying to use the strength of your skin to defeat the people in their mind. It's almost like it's like them trying to be like the Most High, right? By them setting up the infamous image of the beast. Revelations 13 goes into it, which we know is the Cesare Borgia, right? The painting who was supposed to be the Son of God, and then everything that comes with that stems from that to get us and other dark nations to hate themselves just on a visceral level, to despise how they look. And what that does to the psyche of the people, which makes them easier to rule. It's almost a corruption of what the Most High does for us in righteousness, which is to put the fear and dread of other nations that want to try to battle against us. They got their own, counterfeit version of that through this image of the beast. Like we see them even trying to do that here at this time.
Yeah, at this point also, when the people put themselves in such a humble position, the Spirit is working with them and reveal to them the nature of the fight so that they can be comforted and not be worried about the thing they see on the outside. So they see the chariots, they see everything encompassed about them. When you get into that level where you pray to the Most High and you understand, the Most High open the Spirit of the Most High open their understanding so they can see, right, the nature of the fight. Right here, when they opened the scroll, they understood what was behind everything that's happening. It's evil doing. Like, those people consulted images. They painted those images, but behind those images are evil spirits, idols, things that the Most High told them not to do. So at that point, Israel consulted with the real deal, the Most High. And now they see, that's how they're going to win the fight. Right? That's how they get confident. Right? Because if you go outside and you're going to fight, you see all the artilleries, you see all the weapons, and the Most High got to open your eyes so you can get an idea, so you can get confident. Otherwise, it's you against them. And with logics, you will fail.
Right. So this is Job 9:24 to link with 3 and 48, of course, which tells us, our favorite, one of our favorites to always read. And we read it because we just know how prevalent the image of the beast is in the hearts and minds of our people, the other dark nations, and even Esau too. Job 9:24, it says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He, this wicked, covereth the faces of the judges thereof. Who are the judges? The Most High, Christ, the angels, us. If not, where and who is he? Like I say, you look at the other dark nations, right? They never tried to do that when it came to their gods. Their gods just look like them, right? Whether it's the Hamites, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Ishmaelites, right? Their prophets and leaders and gods and all this other stuff are a reflection of them. When it comes to our records, Esau wants to put his face on our records, our ancestry, and other dark nations like Ham in particular, right? To try to recast them to look like them. And it's funny because there is depending on the time period, there is some accuracy to it to where people will say, well, how are you gonna have Elizabeth Taylor play Cleopatra? That's ridiculous. But depending on when you go in history, that may actually be accurate, right? Because we know from the Cleopatras, them coming from most of them, because there's more than one Cleopatra. People don't know. They come from the Ptolemies, who are actually Esau. So it's like it might not be too far from the truth. But now before the Greeks were in Egypt, yeah, of course, like going back to Nefertiti and Akhenaten and all those folks. Yeah, those are people of color. But with Esau, he'll make them all look like him, right? He'll try to cover all their faces. But we just use that as an example. But we don't really care about that as much as we care about them trying to cover up the Most High Christ in the Elohim and us, since that's who we are. It's our culture.
Right. And there's another level to this too, in terms of those people that create those images and have people worship them. And there's a level of there's some deep lies behind it, to the point where you're gonna think it's an image that look like them, to fool the masses to see you superior than this group of people. But meanwhile, there's demonic spirit they worship. They know it's not the real deal. The high level people who worship spirits, they know that behind the image they give you is just a means to an end. But it's not really about the image.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the deity, or not the deity, the spirit behind, the demonic spirit behind what you worshiping. But it gotta give you an image, but that image make you feel good because it looks like you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another level to the whole image thing. That's why when Moses said, "Do not make image of any likeness of any likeness of anything, waters under the earth and the waters, don't make any image." But because when we do that, we go outside of those things, because there are spirits behind these things that's operating in disguise.
Yeah, to worship.
To worship.
Right. I know you knew it. Just want to say it because you want to always make sure you read down for the person, because they might get confused, right?
Right.
Because they say, well, wait a minute, I can't buy a painting, I can't paint pictures. Yeah. It's like, no, it's the context. It's why are you painting a picture? It's why are you making the sculpture? If you're making it as a means, like you said, to worship something you ought not, that's when it's that gift and that talent to paint or sculpt whatever it is you're making now becomes corrupted.
Right.
So it's
not
why,
about the painting.
It's the why behind what you're doing.
Right. You got people pay attention to the painting more than they pay attention to the designer that paint the painting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the designer that paint the painting. Some people fall in love with a piece of painting, like, man, I like the abstract, but they forget somebody designed it. That's the person that's pretty much should be at play. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. You see the image, you bow down, you pay attention to the image, but it's not the image, it's the spirit behind the image.
Mm-hmm. I think you're alluding to Romans chapter 1, yeah? Worshipping the creature more than the creator, right?
God.
What's a creature? Anything that's created. But who's the creator? Absolutely. Let's continue on in verse 49. It says, they brought also the priest's garments and the first fruits. Oh, that's coming up in the summer, right? And the tithes and the Nazarites they stirred up, who had accomplished their days, right? The Nazarite vow, like it tells you in number 6. They cried, they with a loud voice toward heaven, saying, "Who shall we do? What shall we do with these? And whither shall we carry them away? For the sanctuary is trodden down and profaned, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. And lo, the heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they imagine against us, thou knowest." Right? So let me link this real quick with 52. This is 2 Samuel. Mm. 24. I'm gonna read 10 down to 14. Just to showing when David made his transgression, right? By counting the people, right? And also gave him an ultimatum as far as judgment. Check out how David kind of plays out the options, right? From bad to worse, and which one to go with. So this is 2 Samuel 24 and verse 10. It says, "And David's heart smote him after he had numbered the people. And David said unto Yahweh, I have sinned greatly in that I have done." So he came clean before Yahweh, right? So we always want to make sure we do that if we ever sin, right? Don't go into denial mode. Because how you going to deny before the Most High? He sees everything. He knows before you even did it, let alone thought it. "And now I beseech thee, O Yahweh, take away the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. For when David was up in the morning, the word of Yahweh came unto the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, Go and say to David, Thus saith Yahweh, I offer thee three things. Choose one of them, that I may do it unto thee. So Gad came to David and told him, and said unto him, Shall 7 years of famine come unto thee in thy land? Or wilt thou flee 3 months before thine enemies, while they pursue thee? Or that there be 3 days pestilence in thy land? Now advise and see what answer I shall return to him that sent me." So all three are bad, right? But it's like, hey, which one do I go with? So 7 years of famine, 3 months on the run, 3 days pestilence in the land. So he says in verse 14, David said unto Gad, I am at a great strait. Let us fall now to the hand of Yahweh, for his mercies are great. And let me not fall into the hand of man. Right? So he said, you know what? Let's let the Most High do it directly, right? I'd rather go with that as opposed to fall into the hands of man, which we're going to get into again as we go through Maccabees. We get into that brother Raziz, right? Who was considered a father of the Jews, a leader at that time, and what the Greeks wanted to do to him. You see similar sentiment. Even Saul had this sentiment as well when you read in another place in the scriptures, as far as at the end of 1 Samuel's, where he didn't want to fall into the hand of the Philistines, right? That were coming against him and Jonathan when they were fighting against them. So, yeah, you can only imagine what these Greeks want to do, right? So you know how the Most High made them. But let's go back to 1 Maccabees 3. Let's read on in verse 53. It says, How shall we be able to stand against them except thou, O power, be our help? So acknowledging the Most High is the one who fights the battle, who establishes the victory just through us. Then sounded they with the trumpets and cried with a loud voice. After this, Judas ordained captains over the people, even captains over thousands, over hundreds, over fifties, and over tens. Oh, that sounds familiar. Exodus 18, right? Jethro's council, Moses' father-in-law, right? When the people were bringing all these different suits to Moses, and Moses was like, oh my gosh, it's too much. I can't do it all at once. And that's when he told me, he said, look, you take on too much. Just create or find men that you know are responsible, right? And then let them be the ones to handle the smaller matters. Let them bring the great matters to you, but the smaller matters that they're able to handle, let them deal with those. That way, it won't be such a heavy burden on you. And, you might say, well, who's Jethro? But if what Jethro said is wise, then what are you going to do? Right? Which Moses acknowledged. He said, well, that's some solid advice. That makes sense. So he did. So, it's easy for you to be like, to reject the message when it comes from a messenger that you may have not have counted on or accounted for. Like now, we'll say, well, he's heathen. What do they know? But sometimes a heathen might say something that are on point, right? Even a broken clock is right 2 times a day. And when it is, you just acknowledge it and use it, right? But real quick, I'm not mentioning the chat. Let me just read it real quick. This is Exodus 18. I'll just read the section that we want. I'll start from 13. I'll read it rather swiftly so we can continue on. We got to get through chapter 4 still. It came to pass on the morrow that Moses said, 18, I'm starting in 13. It came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning unto the evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said, what is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning unto evening? Because remember, this is when we first came out of the wilderness, right? And just beginning to be our own nation, right? Just not a nation living under the care of the Egyptians. And Moses said unto his father-in-law, because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and the other. And I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws, right? So Moses the judge, right? Everybody's knocking down Moses' door, knocking on his tent. Moses, we got an issue. What do we do? What do we do? So you can only imagine, right? The long line, right? Everybody's waiting. Like we see today, right? With the different court, with the traffic court, or small claims court, or you'll see you have to schedule a court date, and it's like you got plenty of time before you can actually sit with the judge because all the cases they got to handle throughout wherever you're going. He says, when they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one another. Okay, I read that. 17, and Moses' father-in-law said unto him, the thing that thou doest is not good. That will surely wear away, both thou and this people that is with thee. For this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Hearken now unto my voice. I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to God word, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, right? The 10th commandment. And place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, and rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. That's where we see Judas, things written aforetime, right? He's taken that same counsel into consideration. It says, and let them judge the people at all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. If thou shalt do this thing, and God command thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure. And all those people shall also go to their place in peace. He's giving us peace of mind, but at the same time, even Jethro, right, is saying, be it the Most High's will in the end, though. But from what I can see, that would make things a lot easier if we just did this. Then it says, so Moses hearkened unto the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard case they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way into his own land, right? And then we see also Paul giving this similar counsel to Timothy. I'll read this real quick too, and then we'll continue. 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. Just remember 222. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2, where it says, "And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou unto faithful men." It's the same able men that Jethro was talking to Moses about, who shall be able to teach others also, right? So he's kind of telling Timothy the same thing, just on a more direct level, but don't try to take all the burden of all the teaching. Find those who are learning and adding on to their learning, and then have them teach as well, right? So that more can be taught, so that the word can spread. Because, you can do a whole lot. Think about how many of you can do, right? God, makes you think of this, what they call these, not motivational posters, but there's this group of these things called demotivational posters. They're kind of like satires, or it's like sarcasm of like where you see like somebody like, running, and it's like, dedication. That's the word dedication, like some like witty expression underneath. And you go every time you went into like an office, you would see those posters with like something in nature. It's like achievement, persistence. But they had one where they had people like kind of holding hands in a circle, and it said teamwork. Is because none of us is as dumb as all of us. Because it's trying to be like, making fun of those kind of posters, but I just thought that thing was so funny.
I mean, and things, those people that Judas appointed is after they came from consulting with the Mosai. Actually, the Mosai gave him the utterance or the direction on who to appoint in each position. Write that in there.
Yeah. So that was Exodus 18:15 down to the end. And I read 2 Timothy's 2 and 2. Okay, why is this thing so slow? Oh, God. Okay. So let's continue. Then it says in verse 56, "But as for such as were building houses, or had betrothed wives, or were planting vineyards, or were fearful, those who he commanded that they should return every man to his own house, according to the law." Right? So another example of him following suit according to what was done aforetime. And then for this, Deuteronomy chapter 20. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 5 to 8. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 5. These are the laws concerning war. It says, "And the officer shall speak unto the people, saying, What man is there that have built a new house, and have not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, another man dedicated." Right? Then it says, "And what man is he that have planted a vineyard, and have not yet eaten of it? Let him also go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man eat of it. And what man is there that have betrothed a wife, and have not taken her? Let him go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her. And the officer shall speak further unto the people, and they shall say, What man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go return to his house, lest his brethren's heart faint, as well as his heart." Right? So these all being righteous counsels, as far as while we're going to war, to defend a nation, not just to shed blood, but to defend the nation. What good is it going? What good is it you going to defend the nation and you destroy the nation at the same time, right? A man in his household. So this only makes sense, right? So that you actually have a nation to come back to see what the heathen, especially when they're desperate, they're like, all hands on deck, everybody, right? Go to war. And it's just like, okay, well, who's going to tend to the things back home? So how do you balance that out? So Most High, in His wisdom, gives us these laws that show us what? Here's a way to defend a nation, but while at the same time building a nation. Because every man going to be in these positions? No. For those that are, yeah, give them that time to build up their house, grow their vineyard, be with their wife, right? Because these are all essential to what? Us flourishing in the inheritance that the Most High bless us with. And this works for any people if they so choose to follow it. And then that last one, as far as not being fearful, that's important too. I think the French have an expression that even the American adopted. They call it esprit de corps, right? Which is like the spirit of the body. In other words, when you're in a combat situation, you want the men's morale to be, riled up so that they can go and fight and be motivated to fight. But if you got one person in the group that's, nervous and shaky, that thing can be contagious, right? They see one person nervous, then they get nervous, and other people get nervous, and it just spreads. And then now you've got, a situation on your hands where you could lose that battle. And we see the Most High using that to our advantage against our enemies, right? Like He tells us, we read it already. He'll put the fear and dread of the nations on them, right? They try to fight us. Yes, let's go back to First Maccabees 3. I just wanted to read those. Oh, and then Judges 7 and 3. That's the other one, which we read too when we went through the book of Judges in the Sabbath. So Judges chapter 7, during when Gideon was our champion. It says, Judges 7 and 3. Now therefore go to proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 22,000, and there remained 10,000. So see that right there. Only 10,000 remained. But still, as we read on in that story, you see what happens as it goes further and further down. Just to show the same lesson what we're reading here, as far as the battle is the Lord's, the victory is His. It's not so much in how many people we have, how much weapons that we have. Yeah, as far as the fearful and faint-hearted going back home, you see that. So, First Maccabees 3:57. So the camp removed and pitched upon the south side of Emmaus. And Judah said, arm yourselves and be valiant men, and see that ye be in readiness against the morning, that ye may fight with these nations that are assembled together against us to destroy us in our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our people in our sanctuary. Nevertheless, as the will of God is in heaven, so let him do. Right? So you want to join us? Come join us. And here's the reason why it's best to come join us, even if it means your death. But if you don't, all right, then just stay behind. So a very what do you call it, motivating and convincing speech he gave. All the while, it's like he's not like how the heathen will do. You must. If you don't, you'll be punished. He said, no, let it be of your own volition to want to fight for the people and have the courage to do so. If not, to stay behind. Whoever remains, the Most High will work with us. Kind of what you were saying earlier before, as far as the way that righteous plans work. It incorporates the physical, but it's just a piece of the puzzle, right? It isn't solely trusting just what you can physically provide when it comes to, warfare 101. It's been going on since we've had war, right? When it comes to, munitions, when it comes to logistics. So we see Judah's operating on that level.
Right. It's like the battle has already been decided in the spiritual realm. Everything has already been decided.
but the process of going through it in time and space, that's pretty much what the people got to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the fight itself, the Most High already decided what the fight is. The other side also has their own council in their jurisdiction in this, in the wicked realm where they are too. So each side, but the Most High is overall.
Come.
So what we see unfolding in the physical is just the aftermath, the process, time and space. So in reality, if anyone in the fight doesn't understand that if they have doubt, then that's going to be a problem for the whole army. So they have to be in one mind, understand that the battle has already been decided. Has already decided in the. Had already been decided in the spiritual realm.
Come, no doubt. So this is First Maccabees 4. To see what happens next, which reads, then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen and removed out of the camp by night. So he's taking a piece or a group out of that main group of what verse 39 was talking about in the last chapter to go, handle some to go to war, right? To start off the fight. To the end that he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides, right? So taking a smaller encampment to then what? Try to ambush them, right? Because you can move a lot faster with not as many men, right? That's still it's a nice sizable amount, but it's not the whole army, right? Because he said, let me try to catch him off guard. So like any warrior, right? You're going to employ different strategies, right? And we know when it comes to warfare, it's all about deception and surprise, right? If you can achieve deception and surprise, right, you can gain the advantage.
And another aspect of it is the capacity to fight. Like Judas Maccabeus, one might say, man, this guy, where he get all this skill from.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the skill is coming to him in the midst of the fight.
Mm.
Because so everything is downloaded, to him by the Most High. Because like I said, everything is already decided in the spiritual realm. So as he goes, as far as his belief is concerned, he's just gonna go and fight, and he believes in the Most High wholeheartedly. So whatever he needs as far as the skill, how he's gonna take him down, everything is coming to fruition as he fight. It's almost like when we go out to camp, sometimes you speaking, you don't even know what the hell is happening. You boom, 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 you're knocking things out. You're like, oh wow. After a while, you can't even remember one scripture you pulled, but at the time, the Spirit is guiding you and giving you all the things that's necessary to fight what you fight, because it's the spirit. You're fighting a spiritual warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's the same thing with the physical warfare, but it's predicated upon the spiritual realm. So everything is already established, done, and over. The Most High is over everything. The Most High is the king over the entire universe. Whereas you have Satan might be over a certain jurisdiction, and in lying to those subject unto him, that's the real deal.
Come. Got me thinking of Psalms 47:7.
Right.
For the Lord is king over all the earth.
Yeah.
And it says, sing ye praises with understanding. You also got me thinking about Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5 on down, where it talks about how it's part of the commandments for us to always be meditating on the law no matter what we do. To where it's like the law says, when you get up, when you go to sleep, when you leave your house, when you come back home, always you meditate on the commandments, right? Wear them as like a frontlet between thine eyes and as a sign upon your hand, meaning how you think and what you do should always be with the commandments, to where you're doing it, you're going through the motions, and then when you're in a situation, then you like realize, and you meditate on the law all this time. It may be a new situation, but the commandments just like you were saying, they get put together somehow in your mind to where you know, say this, do this, and do it in this sequence, and then you resolve it, and you go, oh, how did I? Oh yeah, I have been studying. I have been consistent. Every day I've been studying my scriptures, different stuff, different times. May not be for something that you're doing immediately, but most I have it to where those things you studied will come back, and then it's like, oh,
Right.
like a carnal example would be like martial arts, right? You go to martial arts practice, you practice in the dojo, you do different moves. You're like, okay, block, high block, low block, and then you find yourself in a situation where you have to defend yourself, and then all the moves are coming out as they need to help you from the robber or help you defend somebody who's being, mugged or something. And the person, they get sent on their way, and you're just like, wow, I've been practicing all this time. I didn't realize, now that they had to use it, I see why, we've been going through those motions. While you're doing it, it's kind of could be monotonous. Like, oh God, okay, block, punch, kick, sweep. If you had to clean the dojo and all that, all that's building you up to where when a situation arises, you're able to respond. So, I can see from that example and how it goes to the scriptures where the Most High wants us to be like that, where we're always meditate on the law, because you never know when a situation might arise where you might need to call that stuff into play directly.
Right. And I'm gonna say this thing on God's thing on the topic is like sometimes we say spiritual, but sometimes we may not even grasp the nature of what we're saying, because the spiritual realm is just as real as the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it's hard to grasp the spiritual realm because we're in the physical. But the spiritual world govern everything that's happening in the physical realm, because the Most High is in the heaven, right? In the heaven of heavens. So now he's governed everything down here from up here. So that's why it makes sense for them to go to the Most High and cry and then get counsel. But how can you talk to the Most High? You never see him. What about the people who have been colonized in England? The kids who have been brought up praying to the Queen. Do they ever see the Queen? Right? It's the disadvantage of growing up in Western society where we're not used to kingdom. Right? We don't understand how kingdom operates. But some people who've been, growing up in the kingdom of settings, they kind of have an idea. You wake up in the morning, you go to school, everybody rise up and then give praise to the Queen. And those kids, they just heard of the Queen, but they never seen the Queen. The Queen never stepped foot, in England. In the colonies where they are. Mm-hmm. But everything is directed based on the Queen intent, laws, and everything. It's the same thing in the spiritual realm. We don't see the Most High, but at least we get to see Yahushua as an example to show us how everything should operate. Then he went back. So when we pray, we gotta understand that we pray to a real deal, to the real deal that governs everything in that ever existed. Yeah. In existence. But some people think it's a joke. Why you pray?
Right.
Why you do this? Why you do that?
Right.
And I pray so that I can speak to the. I'm speaking to the real deal. I'm speaking to the one that's responsible for everything that we see and everything that we don't see in existence. And it's a hard concept for even Christian to grab. This is something that they do monotonous. They just go. It becomes a ritual that they do, but they don't really understand the depth of what they do.
Right. Come. So we're in First Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 3. Counterfeits, man. Everything is counterfeits. So many things. You study the law, you study the government, the structure of how the Most High has everything set up. You see how Esau tries to capitalize on all those things and just twist it in his own fashion, in his own way, you know, and tries to create he pretty much creates a mock counterfeit system that the Most High set up, just replacing himself in the place of God. That's a perfect example of what you said as far as the God save the queen, God save the king, you know. I know was Khan Yao Kanan was he was laughing about the what was in the news like a month or so ago when it was a Prince William and Kate. I'm not sure she's Princess Kate, Prince William and Kate, right? Middleton when they went to go to the islands. You see the kids, wearing their little uniforms, like, and you see they give them like a speech, and they said the picture was one thing, but they said like the people were kind of like had a bad taste in their mouth, just like who are you guys, like why, we don't care about y'all like that. I guess the different depending on which Benjamin you talk to, you can tell a lot of Benjamin was just like, who cares, we independent, get lost, we try to break bread and actually do something with the resources that we have, and you guys keep screwing us.
But throughout the island recently now, every time they come there, there's a protest. That they don't want them.
You're right.
They
Exactly.
no longer want to be under the monarchy of the British. So constantly for the last, even though I was in St. Vincent, I think it was like the Queen's birthday or something like that recently, and they were sending different family over to different islands, and every island they've gone to, there were protests. And to the point, I think some of the schedule they had to certain islands were canceled because people were telling them, no, don't come, we don't want you here. So,
God bless. God save the King of Heaven and Earth, the true King. Now, the hope is, right? Benjamin that's in SVG. Some of them come to the true God, right? As I know this brother's down there teaching, right? So, yeah, man. Us, the other dark nations, they're fed up with Esau, just like the prophecy said. You get tired of his lies, man. Isaiah 13, getting close, man. It had it. He said, look, you guys don't honor no agreements. You go back on everything. Stuff's getting worse and worse. They don't really realize they're looking for a new government, which is really us. Right? We're the peace that they're really looking for. But for majority of them, that's going to be hard for them to even, see it when the whole tide is switched. Like I told you, with Solomon 5, how they're going to behold the strangeness of our salvation. They're going to say, wow, these are the ones that the Most High was dealing with. These are the ones that we had in derision, right? And we counted as their life to be like nothing. Now, look, they're with the saints. Now they're the ones that are in charge. Wow. It's going to be a total, a true, proper coup d'etat, when Christ comes back. And they're going to love it because we're going to rule according to justice, right? The thing that Esau always comes out his mouth, but he doesn't do it. Talks about it, but he doesn't do it.
I want to read Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2. It says, wherein in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. I mean, as you can see, as I speak more and more now, is I pay attention more to the spirit that's behind what people do rather than the person itself. But the person is pretty much bios. It's pretty much, corpse, just like you, just like me. But most importantly, it's who's behind that individual that caused the person to act a certain way, and that's pretty much what that scripture is called. It says, "When in time past, ye walk according to the course of this world." And when we were in the world, we too had that same spirit on us, right? The spirit of the power of the air, meaning what would they call Satan. Everything that we were doing that was against the scripture, everything that we were doing that was not according to what the Most High set up. It was that spirit that was on us. But we think everything was normal, right? Nobody could tell us that we have that spirit on us, but because that's how it operates, right? It says the world of darkness, the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. That same spirit that is still working on those people or those that are in the spirit of disobedience, whether it's Esau, the other nation, right? Even our people too, who are not keeping the laws of the Most High, they also have that spirit on them.
Mm-hmm.
Among whom also we all had our conversation. So in the midst of those people, we had all our conversation too with those same, spirit. In time past, in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desire of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. So we were the same way, walking at the same spirit of Satan. So we got to watch that spirit to make sure that we understand the spiritual warfare. We fighting not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, laws, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So that's pretty much, once that is clearly understood, then half of the battle is already done. The rest is just we gotta always stick with the Most High. Go to the King every time. We gotta go to the King because he's the one that influenced everything. He's supposed to be the one that influenced our lifestyle, culture, nature. We're supposed to reflect him because we walking after the mentality of his kingdom. And that's pretty much what the kingdom is. It's the government influence over king over a territory. So he impact that territory with his will, with his purpose and intent. And then he has citizens that have a lifestyle that reflects that.
Con. So this is First Maccabees 4. In 4, it says, "While as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp." Let me read 3. "Now when Judas heard thereof," let me start from there. "Now when Judas heard thereof," referring to Gorgias taking a smaller regiment to try to take him out, "he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp." Right? So Judas had scouts too, checking for any move that the Greeks might make. "While as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. In the mean season came Gorgias by night." So using time to his advantage, right? Coming during the cold season and coming at nighttime, right? "Into the camp of Judas. And when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains, for said he, these fellows flee from us," right? So he thought he would get them, but then he went to where he thought they'd be at, and they weren't there. He didn't know they knew that he was coming. "But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds," which you always go into. It's not saying that they didn't have any weapons. It's just saying it wasn't on their mind, like they weren't there ready to fight because of, "Oh, I got weapons, I'll be good." Their mind was on the Most High being their weapons, the Most High being their shield, their buckler, their sword, right? It says, because clearly they're outnumbered compared to Gorgias and his 5,000 and his 1,000 that are on horse. "And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed about with horsemen, and these were expert in war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea when Pharaoh pursued them with an army, right? But you can just you can link 9, the Exodus, right? Exodus chapter 14. I'll just read the last part of Exodus 14. I'll start at 26 and read to the end. It reads, And Yahweh said unto Moses, Stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and Yahweh overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. So one of the greatest miracles we read about in the scriptures, right? The Most High causing the wind to part the seas to where we're able to pass, and then brought it back in on the Egyptians, which people want to say, oh, that's a fairy tale, but archaeologists know different, right? That actually went to the bottom of the sea and took the stuff out of it and put it in a museum over there in Cairo, right? And you would say, well, how is it all these Egyptian equipment in the middle of a daggone sea that people never cross? Well, maybe because what we read is actually true. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came in to see to them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Another miracle causing the green grass to grow at the bottom of the sea as they walked across it, right? Because you go to the bottom of the sea now, you would see algae, you might see some stones, right? So it'd be kind of rough. But the Most High had that happen for them as they crossed. Let's see your hand. We just finished this up. Thus Yahweh saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. So they even washed up on the seashore, right? Those that got smashed by the water. Some of them were just, drowned, and others washed up. Israel saw that great work which Yahweh did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared Yahweh and believed Yahweh and his servant Moses.
Well, I was gonna say right there when in verse 6, when Judas appeared in the plain, and then they didn't have swords.
Mm-hmm.
They were so quick. The preparation for the fight spiritually was so great. It overtaken them to the point where they were not well prepared and armed. To some reason, they didn't even notice it until they actually at the fight, at the point of fight, at the in the terrain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were so spiritually prepared. When they got there, they probably realized, oh man, but when they compared what the army has versus what they have, then they realized that, oh man, we don't have as much thing they got, so we pretty much like naked, right? But boom, right down in there, Judas catch him, say, "Yo, listen, snap out of it. We all right. Everything's gonna be okay." But they were spiritually prepared. That's why they but once they see the army with everything they have, automatically, the spirit trying to the
flesh, right?
Yeah, trying to catch. He snapped him out of it. Then they were, got back they got back, to the spirit, and then they were able to fight them.
Come. So in verse 10 it says, Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure or perhaps the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day. Right? So once again, calling upon the fruit of the Spirit, the mercies the Most High has, to what? Shed upon us as Israel, so that we can have the advantage over clearly a force that outnumbers us and has more weapons than us, right? Is armed more than we are, right? As we're discussing. Goes back to what we were talking about before in Judges with Gideon, same idea, to where he's got a small force against a greater force, just so that those that remain that fight the battle can know, not just trust, but know that it's the Most High that delivered them, even though they're a smaller force. It says, so that all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel, right? Like we read before in 1 Samuel 17, like David told the people when he fought against the Goliath of Gath, right? Told him that what? The battle's the Lord's. He's saying the same thing here. And he's the one that saves Israel. Then it says in 12, then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle, but they that with Judas sounded their trumpets, right? So they advanced towards them. And it says that what? Judas sounded, those that were with Judas sounded off their trumpets. And they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. So they came full force, even with their smaller force. They came with trumpets sounding off, right? To get them in that spirit of what Judas had told them, the Most High is going to deliver them. And then as they took on them, you had these heathens say, oh man, these guys are wild, man. It's too much. You know, bounce, dip, right? Flee, right? All those words, right? In whatever language they spoke. And it says that they fled into the plain. Then it says, howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword. They pursued them unto Gazara and unto the plains of Idumea and Azotus and Jamnia, right? Which are, like we showed the map earlier on the atlas. You go further south, you see that's where those cities are, as far as them going downward. So that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men. So for every man that they had, they got to kill one, or point by point anyway. So 3,000 men slain by the Israelites against Gorgas and his group as they were fleeing, still killing them. It says, this done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them and said to the people, be not greedy of the spoils insomuch as there is a battle before us, right? So don't celebrate just yet, right? We got the victory. Yeah, they got some stuff they left behind as we kicked their butt, but don't get too comfortable yet, right? Because there's still more to do, right? Because it's easy for us, and we see this with Israel then and now, for us to get one victory, whether it's a law that's passed or rebellion or what have you, some kind of resistance fight or protest. Once Israel gets one victory, what are we doing? Yeah, party, we got the victory, and then all the while Esau is like plotting revenge, Yeah, we're always so quick to celebrate. So Judas is, remind them, like, look, we still got more, work to do. They still got a stronger force, and they might have countermeasures. We need to be ready.
Another thing to notice here too is wherever there's trouble, there's a lot of darkness. As long as there's able men who know the laws of the Most High, the Spirit is right there ready to act.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be in a ghetto where everything looks gloomy, everything looks total wicked, total darkness. As long as there's one man there or a group of men there or women that's willing to be righteous, the Spirit is ready for the word to just take action.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever there's trouble, even from the beginning, even until now, that's how it's been. Even from the beginning of creation, that's how it has always been. The Spirit is always there to act, so long that you have a man of the Most High to give the word.
Come. And then we read this. We read Deuteronomy 20:5-8, but now we also have Deuteronomy 21:4 that just happened here, right? That Judah is pretty much following suit with the commandments that were written before time. So Deuteronomy chapter 20 and verse 1, it says, when thou goest out to battle against thine enemies and seest horses and chariots and a people more than thou, just like we have here, be not afraid of them, for Yahweh thy power is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be, when ye are come nigh unto the battle, that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people, and shall say unto them, Hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint, fear not, and do not tremble, neither be terrified because of them. For Yahweh your power is he that goeth with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. Right? So that's the salvation that Judas is being used as a vessel to be that savior for them at this time. So another prophecy being fulfilled here through Judas following suit with what was written aforetime when it came to the law, right? Only proper him and his brothers being priests, right? Them being descendants of Aaron, right? So remember that Deuteronomy 20, 1 to 4. But let's see what happens in verse 18. Let's see what happens next. And Gorgias and his hosts are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them. And after this, ye may boldly take the spoils. So, yeah, we'll get the spoils, but after we finish the job. It says 19, as Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who, when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight and were burning their tents, for the smoke that was seen declared what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, seeing also the host of Judas in the plain, ready to fight. So they're at attention, ready to keep the fight going, burn up the tents, right, of all their encampment, and they're just looking at it, right? They kind of did like the, again, you see those like cartoons where someone's hiding and do the people behind the corner, like, what's going on? So that's them in the mountains, right? Hiding out for fear of, then coming against them. So they're like hiding out in the mountain. It's kind of funny because it makes you think about what's going to happen in the last days, right? Where you're going to have the heathen trying to go underground, their little underground base, hide out in a little underground mountain base, try to go in space under the sea. But all these places they go to hide, it's not going to matter.
Two scriptures that I want to read on what I just said. But wherever there's darkness, wherever things are really troublesome, the Spirit of the Most High is right there to take action, so long there's a man that is courageous to take action. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, in verse 5. It said, therefore judge nothing before the time until the Lord come. Because and then right here, and it says the Lord judge nothing before the time until the Lord come. The Lord means the owner of all things, right? That's what the Lord means. Lord means owner. Landlord, the owner of the property. Right? It says, who both will bring to light the hidden things of darkness. So you could see something is really fishy, you can't put your hands on it, but something is really wrong, just chill out, don't worry. When the Most High or Yahushua light show up, it's gonna bring everything into light. It says hidden things, darkness, and will make manifest the counsel of the heart, and then shall every man have praise of God. So what it says right there, when you see things is really, not looking right, things are really, then the Most High will show up. Whether the Most High show up through a man that's gonna, take an action, a woman that's gonna take an action, but it will be, or she will be, under the influence of the Spirit of the Most High to take action.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then the Most High will be glorified, because one might say, oh man, I didn't see this coming. Yo, this thing turned out to be, good. Wow, but I could not see it coming. That's how the Most High operates. When things are really bad, the Most High's glory just show up. Second one, still in Corinthians, but this time it's 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, same chapter. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. In verse 6.
It says, for God who commanded the light to shine out of darkness. Remember when the Most High said, let there be light?
Mm-hmm.
The spirit of the Most High was on the deep. The spirit was ready. It was, on in the beginning. Then the Most High give the word, let there be light. Boom. Then the spirit acted up, light created. Right, that it did. As for God who made the light to shine out of darkness, have shined in our heart to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of the Most High in the face of Yahushua. So the same spirit that acted in the beginning, we ourselves have that same spirit in us to give the light, the knowledge, the information of the glory of the Most High by Hashem Yahushua. So the same thing that was on Yahushua, same spirit, now we have the privilege of having that spirit on us so that we can shine also, right? By Hashem Yahushua. So that's what I said, you're just waiting for a man or woman with the light in him to shine in the face of darkness. So usually people run from trouble, they run from things that are bad. But if you don't, that not to say to run to trouble, but if you have the light in you, you can't be hiding from darkness. Darkness should be hiding from you. So if you're running away, that means that something is wrong. Darkness has taken over you. They convince you that they are so bad that you make you run.
Right. Like it says in the Psalm 94 and 16, right? Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Who will stand against the workers of iniquity? Right?
Yeah. So those men, they were able to rise up against wickedness that was done against the law because they had the spirit of the Most High in them. And when they had no arms of regular logics and arms in their mind, but yet they were bold, ready to confront evils, with not backing down. They walk. So they run, but the light did not run. They run.
Khan. So it says, and Gorgeous and his men are here by us. Oh, did I skip something? That's good. And Gorgas and his host are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take the spoil. I did read this. I think I'm in 21. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled every one into the land of strangers. So they packed it up and got going. Right? Seeing that even to kill all those men, they were still ready to go. They weren't ready to finish yet. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea and great riches. So these guys had a lot of stuff with them, right? That they now got. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised Yahweh in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endure forever. So now we're getting it started, right? This is the first decisive battle where we see Moses is dealing with Judas and his men, right? And we're going to read about many campaigns that are to come. But before those campaigns come, we know we have something else that they're going to acknowledge here as well, which we're about to read about, where it says, thus Israel had a great deliverance or salvation that day. It says, now all the strangers that escaped came and told Lysias what had happened, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he had were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. So now the pressure's on, because his job was to dispatch Judas and this threat. But clearly everything happened in the reverse, to where now he's got to go back and deliver this bad news, right, to his superior, to Antiochus, right? Which means, that's it's not going to be a good thing, right? Antiochus is going to be sore displeased with him, saying, what went wrong? What happened? You got all these men I rounded up. You couldn't take out this one unit, and you clearly had the advantage. What happened? It says, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded were to come to pass. The next year, therefore, following Lysias, gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. Right. So they got a little bit more than I think it says 3,000 here. Before it was 70,000. My bad. So 60,000. It says in 5,000 horsemen, right? So he's getting even more footmen, but not as many horsemen. Because I think before in last chapter it said 7,000. Here he's only got 5,000, but he's got 60,000 as opposed to 40,000 men of foot. He must subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents in Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. Right. So now this is a bigger battle, right? More at stake, but still not as many. But with the Most High, they still got the advantage. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, "Blessed art thou, O Savior Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David," which we already read that, right? It says, "And gavest the host of strangers unto the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his armor bearer." Right? It's not even calling upon a victory that even Jonathan had fighting against the Philistines, right? Before, the favor totally fell away from Saul and his house. But for verse 31, I thought I took this down. Guess not. Okay, there we go. So we already read. Let me get this for verse 30. Link up 1 Samuel 17. I'm going to read 50 and 51. We read 45 to 47 before. So this is 1 Samuel 17. 50 and 51. It reads, "So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistines and slew him, and there was no sword in the hand of David." 51. "Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled." Right? So that's the deliverance of the Most High through David at that time. We see him take the sword. We read that before too in last chapter. But then also a victory that Jonathan fought against the Philistine garrison. 1 Samuel chapter 14, and we'll just read 13 and 14. The 1 Samuel chapter 14 and verse 13, which reads, "And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer, and his armor bearer slew after him. And that first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men within as it were a half acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow." Right? So the same way that an ox will plow like half an acre of land. This is how Jonathan and his armor bearer got busy and took out these Philistines that were at this particular garrison. So feats of strength, but the Most High's strength is what matters in the end, because that's the one who gives us strength. So all these things should both be encouraging, right? For us to look at then and look now and say, if we're in similar circumstances, could we know we can, but will we stand up? With our trust in that the Most High will help us through whatever challenge we deal with, even in these times, against the enemy.
God, I wanted to read Proverbs 21:1. And if you can see, the Most High have something where he attacks kings. He takes pleasure in attacking those kings, the world king, the kings according to this world. Because the Most High said, "You shall have no other gods before me," and nobody should, arise himself as king in thinking that he's sovereign, because only the Most High is sovereign, right? Let's see what happened to those kings. It says Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Whatever this king is doing right here, the Most High is manipulating his head to make him take the action that's going to destroy him.
Mm-hmm.
So he think he got power, he think he got money, he think he got 60,000 soldiers. The Most High actually conditioned him to make that move, and then he pretty much put him to shame like that. So that he can show that he got the power. One more.
He just made me think. It was remember that song in the 90s that came out by Snap? I got the power.
Daniel.
And then they had what's the movie with Jim Carrey, where Morgan Freeman gives him the quote unquote the power of God, remember? He had a scene where like he was first like just doing whatever came to mind. They're playing that same song. I got the power. You see him like making like manholes. Yeah, that's the one. You got making manholes come up. Or you got the moon and made the moon come closer. It's like it's kind of funny they used Morgan Freeman as God, right?
It's like those scriptures they got power in them. I read earlier, right? I read 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 4. Was it?
Chapter 4.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 4, verse 5.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 6.
Right.
Pretty much is almost the same thing. And I read Ephesians 2:4. Now I'm gonna read Daniel 2:44. Almost the same. Follow Harley. All right.
Come.
Oh man, what the hell is happening?
They do.
Daniel 2:44. And it reads. Daniel 2:44 read, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And that's why I said the Most High he take pleasure in going after kingdom, because kingdom is pretty much the most powerful, kinds of system, in existence, even to today, because the king reign according to his purpose, according to his will, and then the people have the lifestyle of that kingdom. And any colony is the same way. Any colony that ever been conquered the same way. And the king's supposed to have power over, the entire kingdom. So if a king thinks he got power, I destroy king and I control them. I got them, I got them on the remote control.
Mm-hmm.
So who got power now? Nobody has power more than the king.
Now you got me thinking about the three questions, right? Who's strongest? One man said wine's the strongest.
Mm-hmm.
Second guy said king is the strongest. Mm-hmm. And the third one said, nah, women are the strongest.
Yeah.
And they all had to make their argument. So king was amongst those
right.
top choices. So
right.
I was gonna say the verse you just read, one of the key But I know this in that verse is where it says, "Shall not be left to other people."
Okay.
So that tells you there's only one nation of people that's going to rule. I mean, which other? We know the Most High only deal with the nation of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So let no other people.
That's right. We usually use this one when at camp, and people say, "Oh, so you guys are going to be the new guys?" Oh, okay, whatever. Empires rise and fall, so you guys will rise up, and then you'll fall. And the next person will come up, right? Like that's all humorous, right? And go, "Oh, so you guys are supposed to be the next rulers? All right, well, you guys will fall too." And this is like, nah, it's gonna be different this time. You shown this, and you shown Daniel 7:18, where it says, "The saints shall take the kingdom and possess it forever, even forever and ever."
Right.
Because we're going to be ruling according to righteousness. There won't be any need for rise and fall of empires. That only happens because the past empires didn't keep the commandments. But it's just people giving their best assessment based on their limited view.
Right. I mean, even reading that, the Most High would never let anybody have control over the kingdom by himself, by themselves, without him being the one who established that kingdom. But that kingdom that will be established forever will have on top of it Yahweh.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, he's gonna have Yahweh. So
There's a difference because it doesn't make sense for Yahweh to be ruling and then Yahweh get taken down. That wouldn't make sense at all. How could the one that created that, the Father gave power to create everything and everyone could be taken down?
Mm-hmm.
right, he will be able to be taken down.
Yes, indeed. But see, Esau's strength is the flesh of his arm. So he thinks that he can secure his kingdom through his military might, namely his technology, his nuclear armament, right? He thinks that thing is going to be able to secure him no matter what wickedness he's done. They're not going to be able to resist that. But it's not true. There's power even more powerful than that. Even though he's attained power never seen in the hands of men, physically, it's still pale in comparison to the power of the Elohim, right? As we read in the scriptures, it tells you that the battle, it's not going to be any battle like it since or after, but it's going to be over in an hour. So let's let you know right there. Just how powerful the Most High is compared to everything the Most High, any and everything that man could ever do. What's that scripture? I think it's in the Corinthians also. It's like the weakness of God is stronger than men, and the foolishness of God is wiser than men. In other words, like if God were weak, that weakness would be stronger than anything and everything that man could ever do. Same thing. If God were foolish, his fool would be wiser than anything that man could ever come up with. Just to show like the gap between what we can do versus what the Most High is doing.
Yeah, man within himself is no matter how much intellect men think they are reduced to dust to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But who gives the man the intellect that they have to be on?
There you go.
Yeah, it started from him.
Exactly. So if I created you and I gave you, I know what I gave you.
Mm-hmm.
I know your limitation and I know how far you can go because I know when I gave it to you. And there's a cutoff point. So how could you possibly be?
Right, because you could think that.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
That explains the free will that he gives you to the point where you can even question him.
Well, it goes back. We were tested very early on. Go back to Adam and Eve. That's what the nation told them in the wilderness. Listen, Most High's lied to you. You could be as powerful as him. That was the test, and our ancestors fell miserably, which where we are here today, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in First Maccabees 4, In verse 36, it says, Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up unto Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profane and the gates burnt up and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads. So upon returning back to the temple, they saw that it was literally in shambles because the heathen had pretty much taken it over, and it made a mess of things, doing all kind of stuff they should never do in there. Even going in there, they shouldn't be in there. Even Israel can't even go in there like that. Only the sons of Aaron can go in there. So you got people who aren't even our people up in there, and they're doing all the things that the Greeks were about, which, any unnatural lust you can think of, the Greeks were doing it, and the Romans after them. It says, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew an alarm with the trumpets and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he had some folks that were, still there, right? That had manned the temple. So we had to do like, some cleanup after that victory to say, oh, you guys are still here? All right, got to dead these cats real quick, or send them running. Whichever comes first. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, right? And that's important because, as we're going to read, you see about different priests where they all weren't like how Judas and his brothers were. Some of the sons of Aaron were what? Unfortunately, sellouts, and they sold out to the Greeks, right? Said they could maintain a certain level or position, right? And we're going to read about that as far as these different machinations that they got going on, from Jason to Menelaus, and the bribes they try to use to pretty much buy their way into the priesthood, which that's ridiculous because the Most High is the one who decides out of all the sons of Aaron who's going to be the high priest in each generation. But, that's what men do when they resort to the flesh, even priests. It says, verse 43, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned. The altar of burnt offerings is very important. It's central to what we're about to read and what the holy day that we keep every winter is all about. The Feast of Dedication, which the whole title being the Feast of the Rededication of the Altar, right? That's what this is. The altar of burnt offering, right? It was like the main place of transaction, right? For Israel and the Most High, and the priest being the go-between. So that's where we go to bring our different offerings, whether it was a burnt offering, meat offering, peace offering, free will offering, sin offering, trespass offering, you name it. We would bring all of our offerings to that altar. And then the sons of Aaron on the Most High's behalf would carry out the sacrifice. And this thing was defiled at this point. And laid the stones, they thought, verse 45, they thought it best to put down, lest it should be a reproach or a shame to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Right? So they want to make sure they took all the proper precautions. They didn't want to go and try to, redo something that was defiled. So they said, you know what, let's just put it away, these stones, since it's pretty much defiled, all this unclean stuff that was done on it and in it. Let's just cast it away and then wait till a prophet will tell us what to do with these things next. Because we know what happens. We read about this in Second Maccabees, where you had Jeremiah, another one from the house of Aaron. He was the one that put away the Ark of the Covenant, buried it in Mount Nebo, right, in an undisclosed place. So that was already in their history. So they probably are considering that, saying, just like Jeremiah said, certain things we won't know until someone later might come and tell us what to do. So they took the same precaution here as far as trying to make sure rededicate the altar, but at the same time, don't make something worse than it already is by taking these things that have been defiled. So they started from scratch. They built another altar, right, just to play it safe and just cast other stones away, right? It says, then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former and made up the sanctuary and the things that were therein, that were within the temple, and held the courts, right? So they're doing like a reconstruction. Because remember, this was the same. Well, yeah, this was the what they pretty much has set back up since the time of Zerubbabel and Jeshua, right? And then later on Ezra and Nehemiah, right? This temple that was rebuilt after one before that was destroyed by the Babylonians, right? So it says they made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick. They lighted that they might give light in the temple. So the menorah, right? They took the candlestick and lit it. 51 now. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make, right? So pretty much all the things that they built that were in the temple before, they're pretty much rebuilding these things. So that's what they're doing here. And then you could just let me just give you these references real quick as we continue on. But this is Exodus. You can just write down Exodus chapter 30. Exodus 31 down to 10. You can link this with verse 50. 4 and 50. Which deals with the altar of incense. Then, as far as the table of showbread, that's Exodus 25. (23 to 30). So Exodus chapter 25, 23 down to 30. And as far as the candlestick, that's Exodus 25, 31 down to 40 for the candlestick or the menorah. And as far as the veil, that's Exodus 26, 31. Down to 37. To 37. And then finally the main event, which is what we're about to read now. Which is the altar burnt offering with the rebuilding. The instructions for that are in Exodus 27, 1 to 8. Exodus 27, verses 1 to 8. That's the altar itself. It goes into the materials that they use, the length, the width, the height, pretty much the blueprint for how it's supposed to be designed. Just as you see for the other materials that you read throughout Exodus. But I'll just mention those since these are ones that I mentioned here. But let's continue on, though. In verse 52, back in 1 Maccabees chapter 4. Verse 52, it says, "Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes or early in the morning." It says, "and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made." 54. "Look, at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs, with cisterns, and with harps, and with cymbals," right? Because remember we read that before, where what? That's what happened before as far as when it was defiled, right? Because when we start off in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, in verse 59, it says, 1 Maccabees 1:59, "Now on the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God." As far as how they defiled our altar. So they took that same day, that same time of year where they defiled it, and they rededicated it according to righteousness, right? So that memory could persist. It could be a reminder, right? As far as how the Most High could bring us down, but how the Most High could also allow us to come back, to be that testimonial of what the Most High's mercy and how he always will deal with us in the end and preserve us, as long as, like you were saying earlier, Khan, you got one or many that are willing to fight for his truth. As we see, Judas and his men are a perfect example of that. So yeah, 1 Maccabees 1:59 to link with 4 and 54. It says, verse 55, "Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success." Right? Joshua 1 and 8, right? Tells us what? If you keep these commandments, they'll make your way prosperous, and with these you will find good success. It says, "So they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and the sacrifice of deliverance and praise." So it says they celebrated it for 8 days. Now, why they do it for 8 days in this time in the winter months? hold this. Let's go to Second Maccabees real quick. Second Maccabees, chapter 10. I'll start from 1. Linked this before 56. So Second Maccabees 10 and 1, it says, now Maccabeus and his company, the Lord guided them, recovered the temple and the city. But the altars which the heathen had built in the open street, and also the chapels they pulled down. And having cleansed the temple, they made another altar, and striking stones, they took fire out of them like a flint, and offered a sacrifice after 2 years, and set forth incense and lights and shewbread. Right? I think according to the Atlas and other historical records, it's like the 140s, like 146 to like 144. It's like the time frame, like the mid 140s. It says, set forth incense and lights and showbread, which we already went into in Exodus, where the instructions are as far as how to build the table for the incense, the candlestick, as well as the table for the showbread. Well, I should say the altar for the incense. Then it says in verse 4, when that was done, they fell flat down and besought the Lord that they might come no more into such troubles, but if they sinned any more against him, that he himself would chasten them with mercy, and that they might not be delivered into the blasphemous and barbarous nations. Right? So we know that would happen again, unfortunately. But it was a good prayer, at least at the time, since we were righteous at that point. Now, upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very same day it was cleansed again, which we just read in First Maccabees 159. Even the 25th day of the same month, which is Caslos. Here it is right here in verse 6. And they kept 8 days with gladness, as in the feast of the tabernacles. That's why it's the 8 days. Because the tabernacles, it was in the fall, it was the 8-day feast. Similar to how the Passover was a 7-day feast, with a feast of unleavened bread. Remember that not long before they had held the feast of the tabernacles, when as they wandered in the mountains and the bens in dens like beasts, right? Which we did according to the law, right? We made the makeshift tent to remind us of when we were in the wilderness, being reminded that the Most High is our dwelling, no matter where we are. And they had to be reminded of that too, being on the run from the Greeks before they were able to have any type of advantage against them. Wherefore they bare branches and fair boughs and palms also, like we did during tabernacles, and sang psalms unto him that had given them good success in cleansing his place. They ordained also by a common statute and decree that every year those days should be kept of the whole nation of the Jews. Right? So that's why we keep it now, even to this day. We keep the Hanukkah or dedication. Here's the reason why.
The thing about the sacrifice too is, contrary to other people, now we keep the sacrifices in Yahushua remembrance, because this was this everything that we were doing is to get us back close to the Most High. At that time, we were doing these sacrifices to bring us closer to the Most High. And this explains why we don't do a lot of the sacrifices anymore. It's like, for example, when you look at the altar was very significant. All these things were symbolic to bring us to one thing, Christ. And for example, the altar itself, it wasn't significant if it didn't have sacrifice. And the sacrifice weren't significant if the people doing the sacrifice, their heart wasn't moved by the faith. So therefore, those sacrifices, it's a means to an end, but where everything has to be done symbolically for one purpose. Let me read that real quick in Psalm, the 51st chapter, verse 16. For thou art desired not sacrifice,
also would I give it. Thou desired not in burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart of, O God, thou will not despise. So the heart of the people has to be moved by the Most High's, faith. You have to have faith in the Most High in order for the sacrifice to really make sense.
Yeah, I know some brothers get under the misunderstanding when the Most High says, I despise your feast days. I will not smell your solemn assemblies." They think, oh, he hated the sacrifice. But it wasn't so much he hated it, it's that he hated our spirit while we were doing it. Because we messed the whole thing up. It's like I asked you to do something, but you're not even going about it the right way. You're not even in the right spirit behind why you do it.
Right. And then the key is to bring you back closer to the Most High. To show that you understand the Most High. Because even the animal that was supposed to be sacrificed in whole. Why? To show that there's no half stepping. You got to present yourself a whole, the whole self to the Most High, right? Not cut or anything. Just the whole that you present yourself. It's the same way where it says present yourself a living sacrifice. Now you can't be half stepping.
You're talking about
all that hard.
You're talking about the Passover sacrifice?
Go ahead.
Okay. Come. So in First Maccabees 4, I'll read 57 now. It says, they decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of dedication of the altar, so there's the whole name, right? Dedication of the altar. Because you'll ask people, even so-called Jews, why do we call the feast dedication? Why do we call it Hanukkah? And watch their face go blank, right? Well, now fake Jews, sometimes they might know the history behind it. But a lot of folks really don't know why we can call it dedication. Just like they won't know why we call it the Pentecost. We're keeping some weeks from now, about 7 weeks from now. But that's what it's talking about. They destroyed the old altar by defiling it, and we rebuilt a new one on the same day, a couple years later. Hence the rededication of the altar, right? That's why we call it that. It says, moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month cast low with mirth and gladness. That we read in 2 Maccabees 10 says the same thing. At that time also they builded up the Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down, as they had done before. So time to rebuild and fortify, right? Against a new attack that may come. Because we know we're rededicating the temple here, but the battle's not over yet. We still have more to come as we read on in the chapters of the Maccabees going forward. But at least we're going to remember this great victory to kickstart that movement of what? Establishing our freedom again and our oneness with the Most High. Like we say when we do the prayers, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, Lord, right? Finally, here it says, and they set there a garrison to keep it and fortified Bethsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea, which I think earlier on in the last chapter, we got to see some of that in the map as far as the readers above and below, and it depicted even certain battles that we fought in the Bible Atlas, which we'll continue to revisit that. And it's pretty much says the same thing after kind of reviewing it. Doesn't really say anything that really stood out to me that was special or unique. But when you go into there's another reference that you can use, not the Bible, but just something as a supplement of the Bible. But the Josephus, this historian, he talks about these things too. When you read in book 12, chapter 7 of the Josephus, pretty much goes into those the history of the two chapters we just read in the Maccabees. They're pretty much described there in this chapter 7 of book 12 of the Josephus, or also known as the Antiquities of the Jews. Yeah, but I'll be checking this out as we go through the Maccabees to see if there's anything, significant or useful to really talk about. But for the most part, he's just kind of recounting the history that we already know, that we have right here in the scriptures. All right. So yeah, Josephus, book 12, chapter 7. All right, so here we're making end. Next week, since we last time we were in Samuel's, we did chapters 12 and 13. So now we're going to be back in Samuel's, first Samuel next week, but we'll be reading 14 and 15, right? Part of which we actually touched on a little bit. We quoted some verses, or I think the verse about Jonathan came from chapter 14, so we get to read that in its fullest. Be it First Samuel's 14 and 15 for next week. Also, this evening, we'll be keeping the day of Simon here. It's not a Sabbath, but it's still a day that we just remember. We do a service now, like a feast afterwards. So we'll be keeping that tonight. So keep an eye out for the text link. That'll go out, as well as the live stream that we're doing now for the day of Simon later this evening. And I'll say a Shar Shabbat once again. Wow, Manachat Tawab, since it's in the afternoon, at least here in the Eastern Standard Time. And definitely stay hydrated, as at least here in the Northeast, where we're at, it's supposed to be like a record high today, right? As far as the heat, it says it's going to be upper 90s, right? It says a record for today, at least in this area. I know our folks watching in Georgia and in Florida, kind of just like probably shrugging your shoulders, like, par for the course.
It's like that here every day.
Yeah. And we mentioned, it's like, it's 30 degrees up here. They're just like, what? 30? I'm grabbing a jacket when it's in the 60s, let alone 50s, So, yeah. That's just how it is, right? Depending on where you live in the earth. All right. So, once again, Shar Shabbat. Well, Malachat Tawab. I'll say Brakatei Hao by Hashem Yahushua, La Ruach HaKodash. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. May Israel continue to wake up. May the 1/3 be continually being taught and sealed, whoever they may be amongst us all, so that we can be ready for Christ's return. And with that, we'll do the closing prayers.
That's the reading for next Sunday.
Oh, First Samuel's 14 and 15. I think I sent you the chart.
You emailed it, right?
No, I think I texted it to you, a screenshot.
It wasn't Salat, man. What's next week? What we read next week?
First Samuel's 14 and 15.
Wow.
Yondabar. Someone get that door, Baba Koshan. Barakatha Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai, Asheranathan and Al Parya, Gapan Thwada Aman. La Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai, Av Yashra. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. And Madwa, Paniwa Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawa, Aitad, Yemyan, Aitad, Shalak, Mike Allah, Wa Alahayim, Tazwadakim, La, Shemar Al, Barak, Rapah, Magan, Wad Chazayak, Banya, Yasha Allah, Wa Shalak, Lanawa, Rabiim, Kakama, Rabiim, Da'if, Rabiim, Bayanad, Rabiim, Sabalanwath, Rabiim, Amawan, Rabiim, Aqua, Rabiim, Ahabiim, Rabiim, Haganah, Rochanaya, Wasalak, Kal, Katayemnawa, La Akim, Wa Akiwa, Wayasha'ala, Damyad, Waiwalam, Ba'asham, Yahawashai, Tawada, Aman. English translation: Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now. Right now, send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. The Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha Allah, Wabat Yasaparim, Shema, Yasharele, Yahweh, Allah, Yahweh, Yahweh, Akher. English translation: Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books or the school. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. So once again, Ashar Shabbath, Wa Manakha Tuwam. And once again, Barakat Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai, Arukha Kodash. That, Shalom. Most times we will talk to everybody this evening for the day assignment.
Shalom.
Shalom.